Bam 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 bim bam 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 bim bam 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 bam. Okay, Rabbi Zeilingold, Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem Shalom.
And thank you very, very much for doing this. This is a blissful spiritual pleasure for me to be sitting here and seeing you and talking to you.
Thank you very much for saying that. The pleasure is mine.
So to everybody who's watching, I want to tell you who this is. Rabbi Zeilingold is the rabbi of a shul in Minnesota called Adat Israel Synagogue. And Rabbi Zeilingold happens to be the longest serving pulpit rabbi in Minnesota. He came out to Minnesota a long, long time ago, even before cell phones were taking pictures. And when I grew up, all of my memories of shul are from his shul, from Adat Israel. And they are very fond memories. When I was a little child, we lived far away from shul. We lived on Highland Parkway. It was quite a walk. And but we walked it, we hiked it, we went across the golf course, we came to shul, we enjoyed ourselves. I have amazing memories there of Simchas Torah, Hakafis and Simchas Torah, dancing, and all the Yom Tovim. Anyway, some of the fondest memories of a very beautiful childhood are from the shul of Adat Israel, and for that, I have Rabbi Zeilingold to thank. And Rabbi Zeilingold, I want you to know that at our shul in Calabasas, many of the customs and traditions of Adat Israel were transplanted into our shul. And I want to give you an example. On Simchas Torah, late into the celebrations, everybody who's able makes a kula, makes a somersault. And the rabbi makes one too, but first the rabbi has to put his hat on the floor so that he doesn't ruin it in the somersault. And then very carefully roll onto the hat and make it flat like a pancake during the somersault. It's a very, very holy tradition from my childhood, one of the great highlights of the year, but also some more significant traditions that came from your show. So before I begin, I want to thank you for such a big part of a beautiful, wonderful childhood in Highland Park, Minnesota, and Hashem should help that Highland Park and all the cities and all the states and the whole world should be blessed with peace.
Good. Amen.
So, Rabbi, the purpose of these interviews is a personal mishigas. I'm looking up now at the people that I looked up to during my childhood, and I'm wondering to myself, who did they look up to when they were younger? I know, like my father, I spoke to Rabbi Feller, spoke to Rabbi Shmulu. These are special people, but I want to know, who did they consider special people when they were my age? Who were their heroes? So when I spoke to my father, Rabbi Lu, Rabbi Feller, we spoke about the Baumgartens, we spoke about Mendel Futterfass, we spoke about Follett Khan, Yoel Khan, some other very beautiful people. And I'm very, very curious to hear your stories. Beginning from the beginning. I don't think that your parents were Lubavitch Chassidim per se.
My parents were not Lubavitch Chassidim, no.
Right. So it fascinates me to hear, if you have the koyach to say, how it is that you even ended up in Lubavitch in the first place.
Well, I'll tell you. Thank you very much. It happens to be a long story, and I don't know where to begin. I don't know exactly where the beginning of that story would be. But what did you ask me? When did I become a Lubavitcher Chassid? Or
how did you end up in Lubavitch in the first place? I mean,
I ended up in Lubavitch. Okay, but first of all, I need to correct you. Not to correct you on a couple of one item you made. You said that I'm the longest-serving pulpit rabbi in Minnesota, which I appreciate you saying happens to be correct. But I happen to think it's much more than Minnesota. We've gone through that. We've gone through certainly a few states that I know, and I'm very proud of having that distinguished title. But I am the longest serving pulpit rabbi in quite a few states. Maybe maybe, and I can't tell this for you, and I can't tell you this for sure, and don't quote me on it because I'm not exactly sure of it, but maybe in the United States, maybe.
Aha.
Okay. Point number two, you said that you've transferred the very holy custom we have on Simchas Torah. Now Simchas Torah to do Kodesh to turn around, and I just have to remember that because I usually make the announcement and say, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know we are the only shul in the whole United States of America where they do Kodesh. And everybody goes, hey, we're the only ones, we're the only ones. So I'll just have to either not say it or hope that nobody's ever been to visit your shul. But that's Let me just give you my background, if you don't mind. My name is correctly Zeilingold, and I was born in London in the year 1940, September 1940. And if you got a good mathematical head, you could figure from that right away that sometime in this year I'm going to become 80 years old, and that is correct. Looking forward to that in about 3 months. And as a youngster, I was born in London, England. I went to schools in London. I went to Gateshead, which is a very famous yeshiva, one-on yeshiva. My family came here in 1954. January, my father had come before, and my son, I had a sister and a brother. They had left, and my father was here, and my mother was in London, still in London. I was at the Gateshead, and I went, and I had a sister there. She should live and be well. And in January, we came here to join my father in the United States. And you're asking me when did it begin? When did my becoming a Lubavitcher or family becoming a Lubavitcher, where did that begin? Well, I'll tell you. When I came we came on a boat. We came on a boat from London to America, and the boat docked at the 42nd Street in New York. And my father had been here before, so my father. I was 13 years old, it was a few months after my bar mitzvah. My father took us to a little apartment that he had arranged. And the apartment was on St. Mark's Avenue, which is, if you know the Crown Heights area, you know, of course, the streets, one side of Eastern Parkway, the streets on the other side, which you have to cross Eastern Parkway from 770, going down about 8 blocks down, there's the St. Mark's Avenue. And we had a little apartment on St. Mark's Avenue between Nostrand and New York Avenue. Now, it does so happen that I have an uncle who had a store on Kingston Avenue. At that time, Lubavitch the Rebbe was 4 years into being the Rebbe. And my uncle had a store on Kingston Avenue, 380 Kingston Avenue, which is a butcher shop. And is now, I think, it's a little cafeteria, a breakfast place right in the corner of Crown Street. And my uncle, Oliver Shalom, he passed away actually last year. My uncle, my mother's brother, had been in the United States Army, and he had come to visit us in England when he were when he was deployed to England. Came to visit us, and he used to tell me stories about America. Now, I was a kid then, and to me, America was like, I don't want to compare it to Gan Eden, but it was an unbelievable place, unbelievable. In America, they got chewing gum, and in England, they got all kinds of things. And so when I came there, my father, from the boat docked. The trip from England had taken 11 days. The boat docked, and then we went together, my father, my mother, my sister. We went together to the apartment, and I was 13 years old, and I said, Daddy, I gotta go to see Uncle Dave's store. Actually, we didn't call it a store, we called it a shop. In England, they call it a shop. I've gotta see the shop, I gotta see the shop. That was the only thing I wanted to do. I got to go visit his shop. My father said, okay, I'll take you. And we're on St. Mark's Avenue. So my father will walk, and this is going back, it must be certainly 60 years, over 60 years for sure. I came in 54, well, figure it out for yourself. And I believe it or not, but I remember the way my father took me from St. Mark's Avenue. We walked either up New York Avenue or Brooklyn Avenue, and we walked up to Kingston Avenue. The plan was to cross over Eastern Parkway at Kingston Avenue. So now we were on on Eastern Parkway. Hope you're following me, on Eastern Parkway between Brooklyn and Kingston Avenue, exactly opposite 770. We were walking together. It's the first time I was in America. I hadn't been there more than 2 hours. And then my father whispered to me in my ear, he said, that man who's coming towards us, he's the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Seriously.
I didn't know anything about him. I knew about him. I knew about it, but not more than I knew about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe walked past us. He looked at us. I looked at him. Certainly didn't say anything, but that was certainly my first meeting with the Rebbe. And I think to myself, that was the beginning of my coming to Lubavitch, okay? So now you know how I started off in Lubavitch. So that was it. I'd seen the Rebbe the first time I came. I didn't see him for many years later. But to make a long story short, I went to Torah Vodaas, which was a yeshiva in Brooklyn. And I graduated, actually I graduated at the age of 16, which is I think a little young. And that is because when I came, the year I came, we didn't have the same class way of the construction of how the classes were made and who went where, and the grades wasn't the same there as here. So I went into the first year of high school. I should have gone into the past, I should have gone to the 8th grade, but I went to the first year and I graduated when I was 16. That year when I was 16, I have to tell you the truth, I'm being very honest with you. I'm an honest person. I never lied to anybody, and I did not know what I'm going to do. I graduated from high school I had no idea what I'm going to go. And my family were not able to be the greatest help to me, but I had a good friend, a very, very good friend. And he went to another issue, he went to Chaim Berlin. But he had somehow fallen into going to Gan Yisrael, to the camp, during the summer. And he went there, he had a job there. So I went to visit him, and I stayed some time just as a visitor there in Gan Yisrael. And then when I was in Gan Yisrael, people said to me, I live not that far away. I lived on, actually, I think we'd moved down to another different street, moved to Bergen Street. They said, come to 770, come to 770, and I'll see you. I had nothing to do. So this is going back to 19, I'm not good with years. I think it's 1957. And I went into 770, I met some people, and that's the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning. And they said to me, what you should do, you don't know what to do, write into the Rebbe, and he'll tell you, and you write into it, he'll give you an answer exactly what to do. So I did exactly what they told me to do, and I wrote a letter to the Rebbe. I said, I'm thinking of going to college, going to university. I had no other thoughts whatsoever. Either go to college or go to university, or where should I go to Brooklyn? Would I go to another place? I wrote into the Rebbe. So the Rebbe answered me, this is going back to 1957, which is quite a few years. And he said to me, I think you should take off a year to study Torah. Just take it, don't worry about it now. We'll take care of it. In the meantime, go study Torah for a year. And I would suggest that you go to our yeshiva in Montreal. You should go there. And then after a year, you'll see how you move on from there. And this was, I come back from camp, and that was like in September. So that is, I came to the yeshiva. Now, my father, Alav Shalom, my family was a family of Staliner. But my father had a relationship with the Rebbe. And before we came, he had asked the Rebbe certain questions. And this was about a year after the Rebbe, officially became Rebbe. So he had a back and forth with the Rebbe. And then when I went into Lubavitch, my father began to take the Lubavitch more seriously. I mean, in terms of following what Lubavitch does. And my father was very careful the way he davened very carefully. And he started to daven from the Nusach HaRisidah. And then we moved to Eastern Parkway. So we would come into Lubavitch, and I had relations in Lubavitch. And that's the end of my story. Was that long enough for you?
That's the beginning of your story.
That's the end of that story.
The end of that story. No.
No. When you answered this question, when you answered the next question, I'll tell you another story.
So that's right. So you ended up in Lubavitch. First of all,
I went to Montreal, and I was there at a very, very good year. That year that I was there was Tovshin Yud Ches. A very good year I had there. Excellent. So that's a lot of young people came there. Kabul Bacher came in, who's now in South Africa, and Shmuel Lu came, and Label Turk, And Rabbi Yaakov Shvei Olav Shalom, we know him very well. Rabbi Yaakov Shvei, who was one of the Rabbonim in Crown Heights, one of the 3 Rabbonim, he came to us. We had a good time. You know, we had a good time in Gan Yisrael. He was the learning director, Rabbi Yaakov Shvei. And what he did best of all, he happened to be, I have to say, a tremendous, unbelievable artist. And he did all the paintings for Color War. Rabbi Yaakov Shvei did all the paintings for Color War. And then during Color War, when he put the paintings up on the wall, he did for both sides. He did the paintings. And he would explain every little detail of everything in the painting, why this went with that and that. And his big job in Gan Yisrael, one of the big jobs as learning director, that in the 9 days where we're not allowed to eat meat unless we have a siyum, and camps do this, and they still do, which is fine. They try to make a siyum every day because it's easier for them to have a menu of meat items better rather than dairy or parav. So he would learn every day. He would learn a Masechta. And when I tell you the Yaakov Shvei, when he learned it. I mean, I know I could learn a whole Masechta in one day. Anyways, he did it, and when he is reading it, he knew he was so proficient in his learning. He did it, and he made all of that. And we used to have, you know, I tell you in simple English, we used to have a good time together. You know, we'd do it together. And Nissa Mangel, she'll live and be well. He was there, and I'm trying to think of some other names. Suppose Rabbi Greenglass was there, Rabbi Peres Mushkin was there, and many others whom I might soon remember or not.
What was it like to have Nissa Mangel? Nissa Mangel was out of Auschwitz only a few years.
Say that again.
You mentioned Nissa Mangel, but he was out of Auschwitz only a few years when you were with him.
We didn't know too much about him. When I was there, Nissa Mangel was older than us, and he didn't really come into what we call the Zal. He was going to McGill College. He was going to McGill, he was in university, and I can assure you that he never spoke. We never ever talked to him about that. We knew that. But this was in 1958, and it was quite a few years after Auschwitz, etc. But I know many people who were there. I mean, I know many people who came from there. And as a matter of fact, when I was 10 years old, this is in 1950, went to Yeshiva in Gateshead, and the teachers there, most of them, many of them had come from Germany, and 2 or 3 years before that. Right. And I do remember that the principal of the school, Rabbi Bamberger, Oliver Scholle, he one morning he made an assembly, brought the whole school together, and this was in London. From London to he came from Frankfurt on Main, and he brought us all into a big assembly hall, and he told us, he says, I mean, from London to Frankfurt into Germany is I suppose I would call it a hop, skip, and a jump. But at that time, they had to cross the channel. There weren't the ways to cross the channel there's now. I think it had to be done by boat, whatever. But he says, I want to tell you, he told all of us, I want to tell you, I'm making a trip to Germany today. Now I'm going to Germany. It's like probably, 5 years after he escaped from there. He told me, we knew what had happened. And he said, I have to go because I have to go to visit the graves of my parents. I'm going there. And he held up a bottle of water. He says, well, I'm in German soil. I'm not going to touch any food at all. I promise you. I would touch nothing that is German, nothing whatsoever. I'll go to the Kavarim, I'll go to the graves, and I'll come back. And this is the water I'm going to drink. I'll take with me a bottle of water. I mean, so the Shoah, the Chman Islam, what happened was still part of our lives, ingrained in our lives. And we knew many people who come out from there, and we spoke to them. But I don't remember ever Nissa Mangel certainly not discussing it publicly.
So the mashpia in Montreal then was
by Greenglass.
By Greenglass.
Now that was the mashpia, but we had our own mashpia, not our own mashpia, but the class that came in. Our mashpia was Beryl Mushkin, Zeilingold and Stark. Rabbi Greenglass used to bring with us, used to spend time with us, and he was the mashpia. But he took care of it. We had a class of probably 15, 20 people my own age, 16, 17, 18, or just graduated, or a year after graduation. A few people came from Pittsburgh to join this yeshiva. But we had a very, very homogeneous group at that time. A good group, very good group.
So your friendship with Rabbi Shmuel Lu is legendary. Everybody knows is legendary. Everybody knows Rabbi Zeilingold and Shmuel Lu. Old, priceless friendship. But
yes.
How did this friendship develop?
I don't know. They say birds of a feather fly together. We had a lot we'd both been in Torah V'das. He came in Torah V'das. We both graduated at the same time. But actually, Torah V'das, that graduation class had actually 3 classes. And I don't think we were in very few classes together. I did know him. But we came into Lubavitch, actually, he had been involved in Lubavitch before they came. By Geshem Mendel Goreligs or Zeilingold used to go there, used to teach them. I was never part of that. I never knew anything about Lubavitch when I was in Torah V'das. He used to give classes in Torah V'das, in classes, at least a few of the Moshe Feller I know was involved in that. And he knew about Lubavitch, but still we came as pretty much, he had seen the Rebbe. I don't think he had not been in Yechidus. He had never been in Yechidus. And I think Moshe Feller is older than us, he's 2 years older than us. He had been in Yechidus, I think even while he was still in Torah V'das. But and we had the experience together. We were in this class with Beryl Muchkin, and we went through things together. Also, when we ate, they didn't have a dining room for us, a common dining room. And we used to sleep in people's houses. We had to pay. Then later on, they got 2 big places, an upstairs and two houses where we slept, and we ate there. And we had 2 cooks, and one cook was Mrs. Morozov, Aleh Hashalom, and Mrs. Putman, Aleh Hashalom, was our cook. And we always at the lunchtime, we'd always talk together and enjoy time together, go back and forth together. So we got close to each other.
So you spent a year in Montreal, a good year,
I spent
solid year, because the Rebbe asked you to spend a year in yeshiva.
He told me to spend a year in yeshiva, but then when I finished that year, I mean, it's very, very obvious to me that I was going to continue. I don't know if I asked the Rebbe, if I didn't ask the Rebbe, but I just continued. I did continue. And then, I don't know exactly what point it was, I went into Yechidus, and this is already, I'm already in Toshin Yutes. I'm in Toshin Yutes. I have it written down, and I'm sure I have it written down someplace. I went into Yechidus, and the Rebbe said to me, he knew I'd been in Montreal. He says, I think you should come and study here in 770. And I have to tell you, when the Rebbe told me that, I was not terribly thrilled by that, because to me, the 770 was only 770. They studied upstairs, and they didn't have any extra room. They didn't have rooms, so they just had one zawa where everybody sat at one table. And my family lived there, which is, I suppose, good. But the Rebbe said, I want you to come to 770. And the Rebbe also told me, and he said, I want you to come to 770. And the Rebbe said to me, he said, here in 770, we have a custom, which actually the Rebbe had introduced. I don't know if he called it a custom or not, but he said what we do is, the Rebbe had spoken about this in a Fabrein. And last week, when we said the last chapter of the Pirkei Avos, in the 6th chapter, we talk about 48 levels, or 48 matters that bring Torah together. The 48 keys to learning Torah, being proficient in Torah. And one of them is Pilpul HaTalmidim. That means that the students sit together and they go back and forth and they have a discourse, they have a discussion of it. So the Rebbe introduced the idea of having Pilpulim. And so the Rebbe said to me, here in 770, every Friday, and in the afternoon, in the morning, one of the Talmidim says a pulpul, which means he gives a deep talk in the teacher of the Gemara, or whatever they're learning, and goes into it in depth and cuts it from here and from there and brings in the rabbis and the sages and the teachers and makes a whole big thing out of it. And Rebbe said, we have the custom here that we do that. And then as Rebbe was talking to me, and why he said the following, I don't know, but he decided to tell me who's been saying recently. So the Rebbe, as he's talking to me, the Rebbe, I think he was partly talking to himself and to me, he was saying, well, who said last Friday? He said, last Friday, Yitzchak Meir Hertz said. Yitzchak Meir Hertz is a Rosh Hashanah now in London. Yeah, last Friday, Yitzchak Meir Hertz said. And the Friday before that, Shafala said to him. And the Friday before that, anyways, he stopped there. But he told me he wants me to say a pilpul. And when we write a pilpul, we had to tell before the footnotes of everything that's going to be spoken. We had to make out like a program. These are all the matters that are going to be discussed and right where they come from. And that was posted on the wall of 770. And Rabbi said to me, when you have the written out and typed out, I want you to send the copy in to me, which I did. I did that. I suppose they ever wanted me to feel more comfortable there. And in 770, I was not the greatest learner on earth. And it was very kind, very gracious of the Rebbe to suggest my name and to give me that very special privilege of saying the pib, which is, I suppose, held for those students who had reached a certain high level in terms of learning and understanding. And at that point, I don't know if I'd reached that level, but I'm grateful to the Rebbe for doing that.
So you came to 770.
So I came to 770, and the rest is history. Actually, from then, I stayed from then until I left for St. Paul, Minnesota, 1966. I was there. I went to France. I went in Tafshinachov Beis, which was a couple of years later. I stayed generally there. That I was invited by the Hanhola. By the leadership of the yeshiva, 770, and obviously in consultation with the Rebbe, not my consultation, their consultation with the Rebbe, to join a group going of Talmidim Hashluchim. Talmidim Hashluchim means Talmidim, students of the yeshiva, who get the very revered title of Shluch, being a Shech of the Rebbe, to go there as a Shech of the Rebbe. And we were actually the first group to go out. Not actually the first, because a few months before us, a group had gone to Eretz Yisrael. But then we were either the second group or the first group. They went, I think, 2 months before us to go at Talmidim Hashluchim. And I was sent with the 5 others to Benoit, which is not far from Paris, where the Babbage has a yeshiva. And we went in, there was 2 others that year. We went in Adar Rishon, I do believe. And when we went, it was my understanding that don't plan on coming back here soon. You might come back, you're going to Shliach, when you come back, it could be not going to come, you may not come back to Brooklyn for 20 years or 30 years, who knows? Well, anyways, we came back, we went in Adar, we came back in Elul. And why we went for such a short time, I don't know. And I do like to think, and I do like to believe that the Rebbe had certain things he wanted us to do and fulfill. And we did fill that. I went with very, very good other students, and we got very warm letters from the Rebbe. The Rebbe did write to us, and he would write letters to Talmidim Hashluchim, send us letters. And the Rebbe sent us directives when we were there. And we went, and actually, and this sounds a little strange now, but this is going back to, when was it? It was 1951 and 61. I get all mixed up.
62.
1961, 62. For 61, 60, was it 61? Yeah, 61, 58, 60, 61. And for some reason, they couldn't get any, now listen to this one. For some reason, they couldn't find any place on a plane. I don't know why. But anyways, we went on the Queen Mary. And the Queen Mary was one of the boats of the Canard. The Queen Elizabeth was the largest boat of Canard, and Queen Mary was the second.
What's a canard? What's a canard?
Cunard is the name of the company, Cunard. Cunard, I don't know, they're very, very famous. That was the most, I think they still do have boats nowadays, ships, boats.
Okay, okay,
They
okay.
ship. But Queen Mary was second to the biggest. They had a fleet of ships, And the fleet of ships, when I had to come to America, beginning in the early 50s, I had to come on the Britannic, which was a much smaller ship and took much longer, it took 11 days. The Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth were known to take exactly 5 days, to go either from New York to England, to London, or from London back to New York. And they would always work it out that when the Queen Mary was in America, they would go back and forth. You know, the people travel. That was the mode of travel, and going back to the 50s. And I'll tell you something that you're not going to hear anywhere else, only from me. Remember that. And that is that the Rabbi told you that the Queen Elizabeth was the oldest ship and the biggest ship. That they tell a story and have no way to verify this. At one time, they're supposed to go five. This one's supposed to, when this one is in England, that one is in America. But one time it came out that they came back at approximately the same time. They both came into the New York harbor. But the Queen Mary was first. The Queen Mary was going first, and it did not enter the New York harbor until the Queen Elizabeth, which was an older ship, which was behind it 4 hours, had to pass it, had to come in first because it was the older ship. Now you have a lesson in Derech Eretz. You have a lesson in Bnei Seva Tokum, that when somebody older comes in, you got to stand up and have Derech Eretz to someone who's older.
That is very cool. That was a British tradition or a tradition of the ship business?
I probably the ships have their own. I don't know. I think it's a ship deal. But this would be obviously within one company, because I'm sure ships come in. They don't check that. But the Queen Elizabeth was known to be, the older, and the Queen Elizabeth, and the Queen Mary was the smaller of the two.
Imagine if they did that with airplanes. Make you circle over. Imagine if they made you circle in airplanes over the airport because there's an older plane coming in. He has to land first. That would not be good. I'm glad they gave up that tradition.
Oh, they took that tradition off. But ships have their own. They have to honk when they go past each other. And there's all kinds of minhagim they have.
Right, tradition. Before we get to France, you said you were in 770. Who was the mashpia? Who was your mashpia in 770? Who verbringed with you in 770?
Verbring with us, actually, there were a few. But I have to tell you the truth, that we had a much closer relationship with our mashpiim in Montreal. Montreal, like a closed area. And New York, and the 7th it was 770. People coming in, people coming out, and this and that. But the mashpiyim there was Rabbi Jacobson, Oliver Sholem, and who else was there? He was actually our main mashpiyah. There were other rabbis there, and as a matter of fact, what should I tell you? Now that I'm talking, and now that I am speaking to you, I'm trying to figure out the generations, but your great grandfather, after whom you are named, as your great grandfather.
That's right,
Rabbi Simpson.
Yeah, great grandfather. Yeah,
he was the one. I remember now. As I'm speaking now, I do remember that when we went into, there was a room where they. In 777, so went into the room. He is the one who spoke to me and told me that I'm going to be going to France. He was in the Hanhola. He was the one who told me. I remember that very clearly now. And he wasn't. I don't think he was there as a mashpia. He was there as a Hanhola, and also your great grandfather functioned as a rav, and was given very high honors and tremendous esteem in his position as a rav. And I know that many of the students in Lubavitch, including myself, when they would have very difficult questions, and I would go to Borough Park where he lived and spend time with him there. I remember that very well. And that's your great grandfather. Olav Shalom, Zala Srange Yoren.
So one second, this great grandfather of mine,
Yes.
Rabbi Eliyahu Simpson, Eli Zeilingold, I have a lot of great grandfathers, and I know the least about him.
Oh,
I've
really?
asked so many people about this. My grandfather Zayda Simpson. I've asked so many people, and everybody says he was very quiet. He was very quiet.
Yes. But we knew him. You see, we knew him as to be. He stood out as a very, very, very special person, and he had tremendous derech eretz from everybody. But he didn't give any shiur. I don't remember giving any shiurim. I don't remember giving any Hasidus shiurim. But our tremendous respect for him was because I do believe that he was certainly not the closest, but one of the very closest to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe in the last year, and I wasn't there, of course, and the Frierdiker Rebbe had been nifter quite a few years before. But it is well known that in the last, the last period of the Frierdiker Rebbe's life, the Frierdiker Rebbe was very, very difficult to understand what he was saying. Now, of course, our Rebbe, who was obviously the son-in-law, very close, he obviously spent a lot of time with his father-in-law, and when his father-in-law spoke, he was able to interpret. But Rabbi Simpson, Olav Shalom, was, I don't know if he was the only one, but the only one I heard about when somebody went into Yechidus, especially like my in-laws, Rabbi Mr. They would go into Yechidus, but they could not understand what the Rebbe was saying, what Frierdiker was saying. So they told me, we went in with Rabbi Simpson, and he told us exactly what the Rebbe said because they couldn't understand him. So it was very well known for that, at least for that, and certainly his credentials as a Rav were very, very much in order. And I remember that for me to go to visit him, I would try to go on a Friday afternoon, and it wasn't easy. I had to take one bus, another bus, I had to train, the subway, but it was worthwhile the travel there to spend some time with him. I remember that very well. And again, there was official Hanhol of the yeshiva, which was himself and Rabbi Mentlik Olav Shalom, and certainly a few others, and Rabbi Raskin, and obviously whatever he told me or he told us, we'd never asked, did the Rebbe say that, the Rebbe said that, but we understood that if I was chosen, asked to go to Benoit, then certainly it was not only with the Rebbe's permission, but obviously there's something that comes from the Rebbe, and that's why we certainly did not take it lightly. And the Rebbe certainly stressed that and emphasized that. And as a matter of fact, when we went to Benoit, I told you we went on the Queen Mary, and the Queen Mary left. The boat left Friday morning. And we were on the boat on Friday Shabbos, and we had to be, I think, at the pier, I think probably 10, 11 o'clock, something like that. But we had to leave 7:70. I don't know, 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. Now the Rebbe, generally speaking, at that time in those years, he went home he left 7:70. Always very late at night. And on the nights that he had Yechidus, which was officially Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, he would start the Yechidus at 8 o'clock, and then it could go sometimes till 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock. I don't think when it used to go more than 4 o'clock in the morning. It could go a whole night. But even when he did not have Yechidus, and when he did not have Yechidus, Rebbe would stay in 7:70, generally speaking, on a regular evening, until late at night. I remember coming from the airport. Now at that time in those years, the Rebbe was the only one who had keys to his own room. In other words, nobody else had a key to his room. He had a key to his room. Maybe somebody had it, which I don't know about it, but he was the only one. When the Rebbe came, any day of the week, including Shabbos, he opened his own door. Nobody opened his doors for him. In Toshen Lamet Ches, when he Steingedach, that happened what had happened. After that, a lot of things changed. And after that, Rabbi Grona got a key, whatever it was. And when the Rebbe came in, after that year, the door was opened for him. But until then, he always opened and closed his own door. Anytime you go out in the middle of the day, you go out to mincha, he closed the door, opened the door, came back after mincha, opened the door, closed the door. And so at that time, Rabbi used to stay late. And I remember we used to come, when we came from Minneapolis, and we came to Crown Heights and went down Eastern Parkway. Oh, the Rebbe's light is on. He was still there. That means if his light was on, he was still there. And it was on many times, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. He'd go home very late. Usually never went home before about 1 o'clock in the morning. And he came in the morning, probably about 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is that the day that he would come later in the day was Friday. Friday, I don't know why. I can't think of why. I never thought of thinking of why. He would come, he usually come at 11, 12 o'clock. On the day that we left for Benoit, the Rebbe came very early in the morning. I don't know what time we left. It must have been 6 o'clock in the morning. But then they brought a bus, I don't know, one of these school buses, to take us and friends of ours to the pier, to the boat. And before we went out, I was told, wait, the Rebbe's going out first. The Rebbe went out first, and the Rebbe positioned him. The door of the school, but the bus was opened, and the Rebbe positioned himself next to the door, exactly by the door of the bus. So each one of us, when we walked up, we walked past the Rebbe into the bus. I don't know how I got onto that now, because I thought I talked about that before. I was talking about your great-grandfather.
Somebody in the audience asked, when did Rabbi Simpson come to America? But I think he was there already since the 20s, no?
I think so, yes. I wouldn't know the answer to that exactly when he came, but I think, yes, I think he came much before. And also Rabbi Jacobson was there for many years before. And I think Rabbi Jacobson was perhaps one of the first ones to be there. But in your family, of course, I knew your Rabbi Yochanan Gordon, but I'm not going to get into that now because he was the Gabbai. But that's so your family is very well recognized there, and we knew all about the family.
Yeah, so about Rabbi Gordon, about Yochanan Gordon, there's many stories.
Yes, yeah,
and many quotes, but about Rabbi Simpson, you hear very little, just what he was.
Very few people knew him. He lived in Borough Park. We didn't see him on Shabbos. I went to see him on Shabbos anyway. And he lived in Borough Park. And he was probably he came in a couple of times. I don't know if he came every day. I don't know the answer. Because I don't remember that he actually gave shurim. I don't remember that. But it was certainly the Hanola. And I remember when he came in, I don't remember the other rabbi, if the other members of the Hanola came in. But I remember definitely, and I tell people, Rabbi Simpson came to me, who told me to come to the room, and he spoke to me, and what he was saying was in the name of the Rebbe. And I did hear, there are many stories are told about him. Many stories are told about him. And one of the stories, which I'm sure you know, because it was, I can't say recently, but the time when the Rebbe finished the Sefer Torah, when the Sefer Torah was finished on Erev Yud Shvat, in Toshin Lamed, on Tesh Shvat, that Friday, it is said, and I heard, Rabbi Simpson said that he went into the Rebbe's room to speak to the Rebbe because obviously he had been there and he had been part of the events of when the Sefer Torah, they had begun to write it, which they had begun many years before the Frierdiker Rebbe had begun. It was never finished. And Rabbi Simpson evidently was very much part of that. And I do remember it being said, I don't know if I heard it directly from him, but I certainly heard it in his name, that when he went in to speak to the Rebbe, and he walked into the Rebbe's room, everything was inside, and he said that he told over that this is Yud Shvat, Erev Yud Shvat, Tesh Shvat, Tov Shin Lamed. The Rebbe was standing in a corner talking. Talking to whom? Well, take a guess. I don't know.
My mother just sent me a message that her mother, Aleh Shalom, was born obviously in America, in Harlem, I think, in 1924. So that means that Rabbi Simpson was definitely here in the early 20s. And my grandmother was born in America in 1924. So Rabbi Simpson was definitely here in the early 1920s.
Which grandmother?
Bobby Gordon, my mother's mother.
Oh, yes, okay.
Rabbi Simpson's daughter.
Bobby Gordon?
Rabbi Simpson's daughter.
Rabbi
Simpson's daughter.
Rabbi Simpson's daughter. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, yes.
You know, you're talking about being in 770 with the Rebbe. I want to tell you something that I learned from you. You and I once took a drive to do some hashgacha work. I drove you around to different plants to do some different hashgacha. Anyway, it was one of the richest drives and few hours of my life because you told me many, many stories. And one of the stories that you told me is something that I learned and I try to practice very much. And that is that if you're two people going into a doorway, going into a room, if one of them is holding tefillin, the person holding tefillin has to go in first. And the person who doesn't have tefillin.
I don't know if it's a has. I don't know if it's a,
I'm telling you because of the story you told me. You didn't tell me a rule. You just told me a story.
Okay, yeah, well, it would be a movie. It would make sense.
And here in Calabasas, there's a lot of Persian Jews, God bless them all. And to them, courtesy is a very, very high priority. So if you come to a doorway with a Persian Jew and you want them to go first, it's not so simple. It's going to have to be a struggle. But when when you have the shul, you open the door for people that are coming with their tefillin, and you want them to go in first. Anyway, the story that you said, I remember it all the time, and I try very hard to keep it. Could you tell us the story?
You want me to tell the story over?
Yeah.
It'll be a pleasure, man. I can tell it over as many times as you want to. At that time, I got to put it into perspective that what was happening. You've got to realize that in those years, and this must have been again in the beginning of the Chavs. Now the Rebbe at that time lived. No, he'd moved from. He used to live. Had an apartment on New York Avenue. That was gone in Toshin Tesvov, and then he had the house on his house in President Street. Now the Rebbe always, and I can't say always, but generally speaking, yes, always, the Rebbe walked by himself on the street. And you've got to think about that because the Rebbe at that time was very young man, he was in his early 50s, very early 50s. And the Rebbe pretty much looked like anybody, he wore a kapot, but the Rebbe never had an entourage, or certainly he didn't have anybody who was escorting him, except at night when he would go home. Usually he walked home many times with Rabbi Chadikov, but I don't think anybody else ever walked home with the Rebbe except Rabbi Chadikov. And Rebbe did not always go by car, very rarely, only certain times he went by car. Generally, he walked back and forth. And the Rebbe would walk up, obviously, for President Street. If you know there, he would walk up Brooklyn Avenue, walk up Brooklyn to 770 Eastern Parkway. Now, the place where we ate, where the Bochum students ate, was at 640 Eastern Parkway, a house between Brooklyn and New York Avenue, on the same side as 770 Eastern Parkway. And we used to run there. We used to go there between Shachris and learning. I think we got 11 o'clock, whatever it was. I don't remember exactly. But many times, when we would come back as we would be going from the place where we ate, 640 Eastern Parkway, again between Brooklyn and New York, and coming to 770, the Rebbe we'd meet the Rebbe, was that behind us, who came down. So obviously, if we were at Brooklyn Avenue, we saw the Rebbe coming down Brooklyn Avenue, we'd go immediately, we'd go to a side and we'd make sure the Rebbe goes in front of us. And one time it happened actually that I want to tell you something. I have to add this to it. It's very important to understand the Rebbe. The Rebbe, when he walked in the street, whenever he walked into the street, the entire time he walked in the street, his lips were moving. Was he saying Tanya? Was he saying Chumash? Was he saying I don't know what? He was always, never stopped. And we always saw that. As soon as he stepped out of sunset, it was always something, there was always Torah on his mouth. And I want to tell you, and I got to remember to come back to where I was, but I will tell you that one time I walked down on Rosh Hashanah, they had the Tashrech in Prospect Park. So a big crowd. We used to go to Prospect Park, a huge crowd. Went to Prospect Park, and I was part of the crowd. And I was in front by the Rebbe. When the Rebbe finished doing Tashrich in Prospect Park, he would go back, not back down up Eastern Parkway, because the whole crowd was still coming down. There was a huge crowd coming. He couldn't walk back into the crowd. So he went to do the Tashrich, and he walked out of the other side of Prospect Park. I suppose it was the other side. But anyways, he came out. We were on President Street, all the way down by Franklin, whatever it is, past Rogers, past Bedford, all the way down near actually not far Grand Army Plaza. Then he would walk from there. He would walk up President Street from close to Grand Army Plaza to Brooklyn Avenue, and then make a left. He would actually walk past his house, which didn't make any difference. He didn't even look at his house. But I want to tell you that I stood. Rabbi Chanukah stood next to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was walking with his machzor, because he read the Shem machzor. And every time he passed somebody, he would nod with his head. He would say Good Yontif or Good Yor, whatever it was. Good Yontif, Good Yontif. He would nod to every single person. I mean, every single Jewish person. Of course, people recognized the Rebbe. They walked to the side, and he nodded to each one of them as he passed by, and they wished him Good Yontif. They didn't reply in words, but that. I have to tell you that I followed the Rebbe the entire time. He did not stop moving his lips. He was davening the entire, whenever he was davening, he was learning the entire time. His lips were moving the entire time. Now, coming back to what I was saying, sometimes we were walking, the Rebbe would be there, we'd go to the side of the sidewalk, and the Rebbe would pass by. And I remember one time, and this was not that the Rebbe pointed me out to this, but this Rebbe, I understand, did this many times. It was a winter day, and since we were in 770, we got the food. The place was at 640, it's in the next block. I mean, what is a 17-year-old boy? I know he'll start finding his coat and his scarf and his gloves. We'd run out of 770, run down ways, and get eat the food and come running back. So as he passed me, and the Rebbe was on the side, next to the houses, walking the side house, and I was about 20 feet away, whatever it is, on the other side of the sidewalk. As he walked past me, he looked at me, and with his right hand, he shook his jacket. In other words, he was saying to me, "Hey, mister, where's your coat?"
You didn't tell me this part. You didn't tell me this part.
Well, you got to hear it now. It's Bashet. He shook his jacket and looked at me, didn't smile, nothing, just said no. In other words, you're supposed to be wearing a coat. You know that? And as I understand, I was not the first one to whom that happened, the coat. Anyways, I'm not saying this happened on a particular day, but one particular day I did walk behind the Rebbe. And when he came out, says actually nobody was around. I was the only one there. And as you know, as I'm sure you're aware, there are 3 stairs going up to 770, to the building 770 building. There's stairs at the bottom when you go off the sidewalk. And there's 3 steps, maybe 4 steps going into 770. And the Rebbe would always open up the door himself and close the doors, unless somebody opened it up for him. But people, we didn't rush over to open it, because the Rebbe didn't really care for that, to have somebody standing there opening up the door. But I saw the Rebbe going up the stairs. So as he began walking up the stairs, and the Rebbe was about to open up the door, when I ran in front of him and I opened up the door with my right hand, and I was carrying a pair of tefillin. So the Rebbe looked at me, and the Rebbe motioned to with his right hand that I should go in first. And remember, we didn't say anything, just, I should walk in. So obviously I didn't say anything. I'm not going to put it. I'm opening up the door for the Rebbe. He tells me to go in first. So I looked at him. I just looked at him. And he said to me, "Du hältst doch a paar tefillin. You are holding a pair of tefillin." And so the Rebbe, his derech eretz, the courteous to tefillin, the Rebbe felt, and whether this has to be done, doesn't have to be done, but the Rebbe motioned me that since I had the tefillin, which are matters of holiness, I should walk in first with a tefillin. So I did. I walked right in front of the Rebbe, and of course I held the door. Obviously, I held the door open for the Rebbe to come in. And the Rebbe, whenever he held the door open for him, as we walked by, he would say, "Thank you."
It's not so simple to hold the door open while you're going in first. The door of 770 opens outward,
It
I have to
happened to me.
congratulate you on your agility. That's agility.
I have to tell you the truth. I did not think about it too much. But sometimes when you're not thinking about it, sometimes when you're not thinking about how to do something, it just happens in and of itself. It just happened. All I know is that within 3 to 4 seconds, the Rebbe was inside. Baruch Hashem safely.
Yeah.
And I was inside too.
So you told me this after you told me the story. I got to spend a lot of time with my grandfather, Olav Shalom, Zayda Gordon, Schallenberg Gordon,
Yeah.
in New Jersey when he wasn't feeling well, and I used to accompany him on his rounds as a chaplain in the hospital, and I would hold the tefillin. He was obviously going to the hospital to put tefillin on with people, and I was holding the tefillin for him and opening the doors for him, and I had the same, after you told me the story, the same experience with him, trying to hold a door for a man who was in pain, and yet he telling me, go in first. You have to hold the tefillin. You have to go in first. So I had to hold the tefillin, open the door. I thought about you. And while we're talking about this, I want to ask you about another story that you told me in that ride. You told me a story. You didn't mention any names, but you told me a story about someone whom the Rebbe was asking. The Rebbe had encouraged somebody to cheer up, to be besimcha.
Yeah.
To live with joy.
Yeah.
And the person had written to the Rebbe and said, if you knew how low I had fallen, you wouldn't tell me to be besimcha. Yes. And the Rebbe's answer to him was, if you don't know how low you have really fallen, and I'm telling you, you should be besimcha. Now, I'm sure that I butchered the story a little bit, but
I remember the story, Jerry. I do not remember the details of the story. Are you sure it happened to me? Because I've heard that story. Are you sure that I told it to you?
I'm 100. Well, truth is, Rabbi Zeilingold, in my life, I have so many times gone around with stories and found out that what I thought I heard, I didn't hear. But I'm 99% sure that in the car you told me this amazing anecdote.
It might be completely different words that I'm thinking of, but I cannot think of anything which would be close to that. Someone who felt he had, I know a lot of stories that people wrote to me that they'd fallen, and you say what? That the Rebbe said to him, if you knew how low you are?
He said to the Rebbe, you're telling me to be besimcha, but that's because you don't know how low I have fallen spiritually. Yes. Okay. And the Rebbe told him, you don't know how low you have fallen spiritually. Yeah. In other words, don't tell me I don't know. I know how low you have fallen, more than you do. And I'm telling you that nevertheless, you should be you should live with simcha. You should be besimcha.
I could think of a couple of stories that I know that I could think that perhaps you or myself, when I told you, getting it mixed up with that. But I don't really want to go into those stories. I know and it could be that was part of the story, but I can't put my finger. I do know somebody who unfortunately wanted to do great harm to himself, and they wrote that to the Rebbe. And I don't remember the Rebbe saying those words to him, but the Rebbe did say to him very carefully that I'm with you and I understand your situation.
Right. Okay. You told me many other stories. I thank you for that ride and for all the stories that you told me. But this one in particular, I wanted to get the background, to get to verify it. But
I don't know.
If you don't remember the details, you don't. Very good. All right. So you ended up in Bern. So after you said you found with Israel Jacobson, right?
What?
You said that in 770.
Oh no, you asked me who was Fabeng. I didn't finish that. Israel Jacobson. Right. The one who Fabeng with us most was David Raskin.
David Raskin.
He used to Fabeng. He was like the one, the Fabrenga, who was Fabeng with the Bochum.
Was he that much older than you?
Oh, sure. Of course. Sure. I mean, he told us stories of Fantosh Yud. I mean, he was, certain. I mean, it was Nifta, of course, but he was a mashpeh in 770. I mean, he was already part of the Hanhola. I came when I was 20. He must have been, I don't know, I'm not that good in years, at least 10 years older, at least. Uh-huh. I mean, the Rebbe treated him when he was the Hanhola. He was head of, he made a Syria Gudas Chabad. he made Zeilingold Chabad was for David Raskin. Rebbe went to him and said, I want to make Zeilingold Chabad. He made it. And he was the one who would go and get the people to go to places to speak. So he must have been high, it must have been well, Baruch Hashem.
So what can you tell us about Rabbi David Raskin and his farbrengens with you, and how he impacted you and how he shaped you and your friends as Hasidim of the Rebbe?
David Raskin was a person who what the Rebbe said, that's what he did. There was no if, and, or but. He did not present himself. I mean, I don't want to comment on his knowledge of Torah as very prolific and his learning Torah, but he was not the outstanding, shining example of a great Goyen in Torah. He was a great, outstanding, shining example of a chassid, doing what the Rebbe wants, but poyel, because what he had to do with was poyel. He made a good Chabad, which is setting people out to speak in places and to do work. He was a man of doing, of action. And of course, he would actually be the, when we came on in the morning, I think he was the one who was in charge of the mashpia in the zal where we learned when he came on every morning for Hasidus. He was the one there, the mashpia in charge. And I remember at least one Shabbos, when as we were learning in the morning, and the learning started at 8 o'clock, the time would be 10 o'clock, when when the Rebbe came in, and the Rebbe came into 770, the Shabbos morning, the Rebbe came early, he used to come a little later, and the Rebbe, instead of going to his room, came into the Zal, and walked over, and everybody stood up, everybody jumped up, he went over to David Raskin, and spoke a few words to him, then the Rebbe left, then Rabbi Raskin said, the Rebbe just came over to me, and the Rebbe said in these words, and you should make an announcement that anybody who wants to hear a maimah is invited into the Rebbe's room. And I happened to go there. I don't remember exactly which date that was, but it happened more than one time. And he was given tremendous covet by the Rebbe. I mean, he was, in charge. He was in charge of pretty much everything that happened in 770. On Simchas Torah at night, was what I think the first night when we used to go to the shuls to and the Rebbe would farbring in 770, and the Rebbe would farbring, and actually the farbring in 770 was everybody was all the Bachurim and the younger light was supposed to go to places to farbring, to make lebedik. I think it was Nashman Service, and to farbring and to make it lebedik. And the Rebbe would not begin davening for the evening until David Raskin had said to him that everybody has returned for their Bezendo. Everybody. So if somebody went out by himself or went to some place, walked to Coney Island, and then got lost on the way back, everybody had to wait until he got back. And there were times like that where everybody had to wait a long time. And they sent out scouts to get that person. But he was the one with whom the Rebbe officially spoke to and discussed with everything that had to do with anything that had to do with the Bachum going here, going there, or doing different things. And David Raskin had a responsibility to the Bachum, and they were very close to the Bachum. And David Raskin came over to me when I was like 23 years old, and I was a student in the yeshiva, and I was on my way to Smicha. And David Raskin said to me, I want to speak to you. So I went over to speak to me. He says, somebody has come to me and wants to be Matzia, wants to propose a shidduch for you, for myself. He says, I'm not going to tell you who it is. I can't tell you who it is. And I didn't ask. I wasn't interested. But your job now is you have to write into the Rebbe, and you have to tell the Rebbe that I have told you that there's a proposition for a shidduch for you. And you have to ask the Rebbe whether you should interest yourself in it or what your next step should be. I mean, he was the liaison. Between the yeshiva and the Rebbe. And I think using the word liaison is the correct term to use, because he was the one who, if we had anything, would always go through David Raskin. And he was, I would say, a point person when Yaakov Chanukah, Alav Shalom, when he came to 770, and at that time, Yaakov Chanukah had come from Penn State University. And if he would come to 770, we all had to get ready. No, we all had to get ourselves prepared for Yaakov Chanukah, which was a very special occasion. He came to 770 because he would never know what a Mashiach is. He's a Mashiach. He's a this. He's a that. He's a Mashpia. Yeah, what Mashpia is. So everybody in 770, all of the Hanhala got new titles, and I do believe that Rabbi Raskin's new title was Director of Student Activities or something like that. But that was his. And
Interesting.
Everybody got a new title because this is we know preparations we made for Yaakov Chanukah. He was going to be, and he was. It worked out beautifully because when he came from Penn State University to yeshiva would be one thing. To Ravitcher yeshiva is another thing. The 770 Simpaka was another thing. And 770 Simpaka was one room. I mean, it was, you go to university. You got an upstairs and you got a downstairs, you got an elevator and you got offices and you got these rooms and those, you got a library, you got that. 770 had nothing of that whatsoever. As a matter of fact, even when we're talking about this, 70 had nothing. When Rabbi Yudel Krinsky made a suggestion to the Rebbe that perhaps it might be a good idea for the Rebbe to move out of 770. So when he has Yechidus, they could have, that actually goes with the whole story, because Rabbi Krinsky had this idea that for the Rebbe to meet people in 770, the Rebbe to meet people in 770. Well, actually, people came in, and there's no waiting room. They had to wait till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. There was no waiting room for them to be. We had no place to be. The Rebbe is the Rebbe. So Rabbi Yudel Krinsky had a very good idea. At that time, Lubavitch had purchased the adjoining buildings next to 770, between 770 and Kingston Avenue. Now, before Lubavitch bought those buildings, there were two apartment houses, but they became offices of the Lubavitch. So I'll tell you this story, and I have to tell you the truth. I don't know how many people I've told this story to, not for any particular reason. But I've just happened to think of it now, just fell into my head right now. Yudel Krinsky, with whom I had a close relationship, he became my uncle many years later, and that when Rabbi Raskin was Matzia Meshishirach, it was for his niece, who became my wife. And Rabbi Krinsky had an idea that he's going to take a floor of that and make it into an office for the Rebbe. He had an idea. I'm going to take a floor and I'm going to make it into an office for the Rebbe. And he worked very, very hard. And he had one person working with him. He told me this. He told me this before I became part of the family. I had a close relationship with him, myself and Shmuel. And the person he had working with him, take a guess. You're not going to guess it anyways. It was the Rebbetzin. Rebbetzin working with him, but neither of them told the Rebbe. Because if you told the Rebbe would nix it completely.
Yeah.
The Rebbe would absolutely not allow. The Rebbe never allowed anything. When they put air conditioning into the Rebbe's room in 770, it couldn't be they had to have a central air conditioning. They had to put it in his house. The only way they could put air conditioning in the Rebbe's house, in the Rebbe's office, was when he went to the oil. He was out for 6 hours. They had a company who would take care of the whole thing in 6 hours. The Rebbe came back and he had air conditioning, boom, boom, boom. They could not say to the Rebbe, could we please install air conditioning tomorrow? But they had to install it and then say, oh, we have air conditioning for you. I hope you like it. So there was no way of saying to the Rebbe, we're going to plan to make an office for you. You got to make the office and then ask the Rebbe. So he worked very hard to put the office together. And I do remember him telling me that at that time, the President of the United States was Richard Nixon. And somehow or other, they got somebody in the White House to find out exactly where Richard Nixon, President of the United States, where his chair came from, who made it, and exactly how it looked. And they had to figure, the President of the United States must be the best chair in the world. So they got exactly the same chair, or the desk, I think it was the chair or the desk, or the chair and the desk. And then they had to get carpets. In carpets, it so happens that my father-in-law, Alav Shalom, who Luquinsky on their brother-in-laws, because my shviga is a Krinsky, is a Krinsky, is a Krinsky, yes. And my father-in-law had a company in Connecticut that he knew very well. They made beautiful, beautiful carpets. They made beautiful carpets. So my father-in-law told Yul Krinsky, I could find a place, I'd get you a good carpet. So he went with the Rebbitzin, took her to Connecticut, with the Rebbitzin, took her to Connecticut, went to see the carpets. And as they've seen the carpets, the Rebbitzin said to Yul Krinsky, I understand that your brother-in-law has a school around here, which was a brand new building in Orange, Connecticut. It was New Haven Hebrew Day School, and in Orange they built a beautiful, beautiful building. And I understand it's not far from, actually it was in the same town. So why don't we just go and take a look at the school? And of course, Yul Krinsky understood. He did not call ahead. Took him to the school. My father was there, and the Rebbe and Chaim Mishka went around the whole building. And to my knowledge, that is the only Lubavitch Meisid she ever walked into. It is not known that she walked into any other Lubavitch Meisid, and she went all around. And the next time that my father went to visit with the Rebbe said to him, "I heard very nice reports about your school." And how did I get onto this? I don't remember. But
because they went to choose carpets.
They got the carpets came from there. So they got the carpets in, and they got everything in. And Yul Krinsky used that room, and everything was all set up. So then they told the Rebbe the good news, that it had a beautiful office, and they got a waiting room and a sitting room and the carpets and the desk and the desk and the lighting and everything. So he said, I'm not going to go out of the place where my shver said Chasidus. The Frierdiker Rebbe said Chasidah in that room, which is a Rebbe's room. Actually, the Frierdiker Rebbe used to use that room, and he said Chasidus in that room. He said Mamorim. The Mamorim of Tov Shin was said in that room. Tov Shin 19 and Tov Shin now, I think it's Tov Shin. When in the Rebbe, he came in order, and there were Mamorim from Tov Shin, which he said. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, of course, lived upstairs. But I heard this much later on, that there was a group of Hasidim who lived in Bronzeville, which is not far away, a few miles, a long walk, but they could not come on Shabbos. They couldn't come for whatever reason when the Frierdiker Rebbe farbrengt on Shabbos. So they asked the Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe, if, I don't know exactly how this worked out, they asked maybe he could say Mamorim during the week, and he did. And those are the Mamorim which are printed in the Sefer in Tov Shin. And how did I find this out? Because I remember at a Farbrengen, there was a Farbrengen after Rosh Hashanah, when the Rebbe was Farbrengen, and the Rebbe was telling at the Farbrengen about, he got setlach, he got people wrote in setlach for, Pepe Dinefesh, Shapan, for Rosh Hashanah. And even at that time, they got 1,000, they got 2,000, they got 3,000. And I remember the Rebbe saying in the Farbrengen that, I don't know exactly what words he's saying, so don't quote me. He's saying, I get a lot of pajamas, and I read them at the oil. I didn't say these words, I read them at the oil. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe used to go for quite a few hours to the oil, and I think what it says, the tshuva, and used to read these. And when he put the shofar, he had the big bags, and I think he said he took out certain ones who were people more of a, they had groups, they had large groups, Klolus Mensch people who represented a much larger crowd. Then the Rebbe said, and I remember him very clearly saying this, he said at the Farbrengen, on Yom Kippur, when we have the Hafsakah, in other words, after they finish Musaf, before Mincha, and the Rebbe writes in the Minhagim, which be at least 3/4 an hour. It's usually about an hour and a half. I spend that time sitting, and the Rebbe had read all the pajanis at the oil. Obviously, on Kippur didn't go the oil, but the Rebbe read all these things in proximity, to his father-in-law. The Rebbe said, I read the Pidyones, zissendik, as I sit by the table, wo the Rebbe de Shver gesagt Chasidus. I sit at the table where my father-in-law, the Rebbe, said Chasidus. So I heard that, and I asked people, what do you mean? I had a table there that the Rebbe said Chasidus. Why would he say Chasidus in his son-in-law's room, his son-in-law's office? They told me that I found at that time that there was for a certain amount of time, the Rebbe had said a mime, I think every week or every couple of weeks, and that table was actually the table. So coming back to this story, the Rebbe said, I'm not going to leave the room where my father had said Chasidus, and he stayed there. Then later on, when they built across the street, not across the street, but across the yard, he would go sometimes when they set up another office. Sometimes when certain people came, he would go in there because the crowd got much larger and was only able to fit depending who it was, etc., etc.
This was in the building on the corner of Kingston and Eastern Parkway, or the library building?
What?
The office that Rabbi Krinsky.
No, it was exactly next door to 770. Exactly next door.
But on which side? Towards Kingston?
Yeah. What do you talking? I mean, on the left of the Rebbe is where it's a house, it's a private home.
Right. So not in the library building.
No, not the library. Library was part of the house next door. No, not the library at all. No, I don't even know if they'd bought it. I don't even know if they'd bought it yet.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. I never heard that. That's amazing.
Many people have not heard it, but
that's really amazing.
But
so what exists there now? Is there an office there now?
No. But look, he has those. He probably dismantled that whole thing.
Wow.
But I remember because I used to go in there because under the guise of helping him, set up the room. I used to go there with Rabbi Shmuel. We used to go there and quote unquote help him out. But I do remember I went through some of the books which belonged to the Rebbe. I don't know, they had the Rebbe's books there. And I remember reading having a book, which was, and I don't remember the name of the book, but it was a book on Chassidus. And the Rebbe, evidently, when he read books, his own books, very often he would make, he would in pencil, he would write things into the book. He wrote the book. I think I had a chapter there on the Baal Shem Tov, and they wrote something. When they wrote, this happened in the year 1776. So I remember, I don't know if that's the year. I don't know if that was whatever. So the Rebbe, in his pencil, made a question mark next to it, and said, and wrote 1778 or something like that. You know, he corrected his own. You know, it was his own book. And I never saw it. But they had the Rebbe's books there, and needed a lot of organization. And I was a man on the spot. Oh, but I have to tell you, I forgot to tell you this. I would have felt very bad if I leave without telling you this. The Rebbe knew of all the hard work they put into it. I mean, the Rebbe understood that. The Rebbe appreciated that without any question. Without any question, he appreciated it. And so the Rebbe, I think, was that year when they brought all the matzah. They brought matzah, which they were sent to Kfar Chabad. And the Rebbe would package it, would take it out of the boxes and put it away and divide it up, who's going where. The Rebbe said he wants it done on that table in that office. So at least they felt that the Rebbe had used that table and had used that office.
Consolation prize.
What?
A consolation prize.
Yeah, right. Well, whatever it was, but the Rebbe would. It was. I mean, Rebbe was right. He wouldn't. It was offered a beautiful. It was exactly next to. If you walk, if you're facing 770, exactly on the left. It's that. What happened to that later? I don't know. I don't know what happened to it, but maybe I know Krinsky has his office. Maybe he made, but obviously he changed everything around. But he made himself an office up there. He did.
Yeah. So now I want to ask you about somebody very special that I heard a little bit about her from my father and from others. But I want to ask you, how did you get a connection with the Rebbe's mother? You obviously had a connection with the Rebbe's mother, Rebbetzin Chana, and I want to know if you could give us a little bit of insight into your, I don't want to say friendship, but your whatever kind of connection that you had with the Rebbe's mother, Rebbetzin Chana.
First of all, let me tell you, I did not have a connection with her. I didn't. Shmuelu did have a connection because Shmuelu would go with his father-in-law they would go to, he went to the Rebbe's in Chaimushka. They were there, they would spend the time there. They went to Chana. I did have some, I did not know the Rebbe's in Chana on a personal basis. I saw her many, many, many times, and therefore I know a lot about her. But do you know anything that I happen to know about the Rebbe's in Chana? Have you heard any story?
My favorite story, actually one of my favorite stories of all time, is Rebbetzin Chana and you and Shmuel Lu, where Rebbetzin Chana said something about your friendship.
Okay.
Something about Vu Usher gate Shmuel, or Vu Shmuel gate Usher. Wherever one goes, the other goes. Rebbetzin made a comment about your friendship. To me, is a very, very beautiful story. But I don't know.
Can I tell you? I will tell you. Do you want to tell you that story over?
100%.
Can I tell you another story before I tell you that?
Yes, 100%.
Very beautiful story. I think that I know I did this story for Jem, and I do believe that they have a disc on the Rebbe's Khan. I think they put these stories there. But I'll tell you a very beautiful story about Rebbe's Khan. I did that when I knew him, and I see Shmuel knew her. She knew Shmuel because her father used to go there. He used to go to the Rebbe's Chaim Moshe, he used to go to the Rebbe's Khan, and he went with, and so he got to know her. But I had a few times when I did visit with her, and I will tell you. But I'm going to tell you this story. I'm going to tell you another story before this story. This is a very special story, and that is as follows. The Rebbetzin Chana was obviously very astute, very, very clever, and a very fine person. And we knew her because she was a known entity. She was, we would see her going down, she would take walks on Kingston Avenue. They say before I came, incidentally, I want to tell you that I mentioned to you before that when I came to my beginning of the Lubavitch was when I was walking with my father. We were walking on Eastern Parkway. And I said to you correctly, that we were walking on Eastern Parkway and we were on Brooklyn, we were on Kingston, we were on Eastern Parkway between Brooklyn and Kingston Avenue. And our intention was to cross over Eastern Parkway and walk up there to the other streets, Union, President, Carroll, Crown, etc. And I made a point of saying we were across the street from Eastern Parkway. And when I remember that was in 1954. I came to Lubavitch 4, 5, 6 years later, and I remembered that story. And I knew that absolutely, that was in my head, that was ingrained in my head. And I knew for sure that I was walking with my father across in 770. How I remembered that, I don't know, because I didn't know 770, I didn't know that. So how would I know, how would I remember on this side of the street, that side? But I did, I was 100% sure it was that side of the street. Then I thought to myself that obviously I was making a mistake, because this must have been about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it is, sometime during the day. Why would the Rebbe be walking on Eastern Parkway between Kingston and Brooklyn on the other side of the street from Eastern Parkway?
Right, I was wondering that.
Okay. Actually, there could be a reason why he went there. There could be a reason, which is not the case over here. But the answer could be that there was a bank on the corner. Probably is still a bank there, where they did business. Where they did 770. And I do remember one time when I was in 770 that they walked out in 770 by himself and walked across the street to the bank, then came back. I remember that. But anyways, here he was walking down 770. But I said to somebody, maybe I made a mistake. It wasn't in there. And he told me, no, you did not make a mistake. Because the Rebbetzin Chana, she used to live on Lincoln between Kingston and Brooklyn. That's where she lived. So Lincoln is on the other side of 770. It's on the other side of 770, Lincoln. On one side, you got Unions and first, then it's Lincoln, and then I think St. John's, and then Sterling, I think, and then Park Place. So so the Rebbe had gone to visit his mother, plain and Prussian. It's simple. And he was walking back to his house, I suppose, to his house. He did not go to 770. So he walked up. He went to Kingston Avenue. Came out Lincoln to Kingston to Kingston to Eastern Parkway, and walked on Eastern Parkway, and we crossed. And in my path crossed the Rebbe's path. But I mentioned to you before also, the Rebbe very rarely used the car. He always walked. So one time I remember that the Rebbe went to the oil, and he went to the oil. We would visit many times on a day which was not a regular day to go to the oil. Sometimes he would come, and he went to the oil. He decided this day I'm going to the oil. I remember one time the Rebbe came to 770, and we came early, but before the learning. I think it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and he went into his room. Then he came in his room, and right outside his room, he met one of the Bachrim, and I do remember who it was. And the Rebbe said to him, I want to go to the mikveh. He said, could you please call the mikveh up? There actually, the Rebbe had a telephone in his office. He did not invite the Bachrim to come to his office to make the call. He said there was a public phone on the wall on 770. He said, I want you to call up the mikveh to ask if they're open. And it was Lema Minkowitz who was there. And he said to Lema, he didn't know from nothing. I mean, he can't do it. He didn't know how's he supposed to know the telephone number. The Rebbe knew everything. The Rebbe told him what to do. He said, call 411, whatever. They had to pay money, and they had to pay a quarter for it. Or maybe not. He said, and ask for, you want to know the telephone number, the ritualarium. Ask for a ritualarium on whatever it is, on Union Street. And so I went to the mikveh. And there are many times when the Rebbe went to the mikveh, and now I'm thinking in my mind, what was I telling you? I got off the subject. The Rebbe would go to the mikveh every time. No,
The Rebbe was going to the oil. You said the Rebbe was going.
He was going to the oil. Yeah. He was going to the oil, and he went to the yeah. So many times he would go. Not on the oil day was on Rosh Chodesh, it's out in the middle of the month, whatever it is. Anyway, so one time I went to the oil, and he came back, and of course the Rebbe never ate till he got home. Went to daven mincha. He davened mincha. And then he was in the car, because he was in the car, and he came out and he decided to go visit his mother. He thought this would be a good time. Maybe he wasn't coming back later. He decided to go visit his mother. For some reason, and I don't begin to remember why. I can't begin to remember why. I don't know if I knew the Rebbe was going to go to his mother. Even if I would know he's going to visit his mother, I would not have had reason to go over there, because he went to visit his mother every day. I never went there. But for whatever reason in the world, I went over there right after Mincha, and the Rebbe went in his way. Rabbi Kreisky took me in the car. They drove to, they went around, he went up because the president is the wrong way, it was towards Kingston, and he went up, went up, UNESCO, I don't know, and he came down president. I think, am I right in that? And his car was facing Kingston Avenue. And the Rebbe was sitting outside. It was a very warm day, and all of the Friedman children were clustered around her. I think it was the Friedman children, a bunch of kids. She was sitting outside on a bench outside her house, and the kids. She was talking to the children. You're talking about what kind of person was she? She was talking to the kids. The kids were talking to her. She was, very kind, very good to them. When the kids, when they saw the Rebbe, everybody ran away, and she was sitting there by herself. I think she came from the other side. Now I'm thinking about it now. Which way is president? It doesn't make a difference. I don't know. I think maybe he turned. I don't remember. Maybe at that time they didn't have the two. I don't know. Whatever it was. Okay. The Rebbe got out of his car, and he started to walk towards his mother, and I was standing right there. And the Rebbetzin Hannah, saw him coming, and she looked at him, and she called him by his first name, and she said to him, "Go home."
Go home.
Go home.
Go home.
Go home. She said, she called by his first name, go home. he looked at her and he was startled. Why? And he said to her, I don't want to say in Yiddish, I don't know how you said, why are you telling me to go home? So she said to him, du hast heim noch nicht gegessen. You have not eaten today. So he looked at his mother and he says, how do you know that I have not eaten? How do you know I haven't eaten today? So she said to him, du bist gewesen bei the oil. Because you were at the oil. So then he said to his mother, how do you know I was by the oil? He said, so she laughed and she pointed to Yul Krinsky. She says, Krinsky steht da. Krinsky is here. The only way he would be coming by car is if Krinsky had taken him over to the oil. Otherwise, he would have walked home. The fact that Krinsky was there, he came by car, meant that Krinsky had taken him to the oil because he never used a car for anything else. So he looked at his mother and she looked at him and the Rebbe burst out laughing because it was very funny. And she burst out laughing and Yul Krinsky burst out laughing and everybody was laughing there. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful scene. The Rebbe standing there near his mother, and his mother's treating him like a little baby, not a little baby. Go home right away. You haven't eaten yet. Yeah, what do you mean? What are you standing around? You got to eat today. Without fasting, what does the mother think about for the child? And it was such a beautiful vision of mother and child, and the child happens to be the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was the most renowned rabbi in the entire world. But for his mother, it's my kid. What?
That is a beautiful story.
It's my for the whole world. He's the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You know, for his mother, he's my son, and he's got to eat without fasting. That's the first thing. You know, it's interesting. Yeah.
One second before you go on. Just to be a nitpick. You said that the Rebbetzin called him by his first name, but I'm sure you mean that she called him by his second name.
But yeah.
Okay. Go on. Tell me what you were just going to say.
Yes. I know what you mean. I meant by his first name meant, you know.
Right.
You couldn't call him Rabbi Schniz or anything.
Right. Okay. What was the story you were just going to say before you forget?
That just happens to remind me of. I was once in Eretz Yisrael. I was in Rachel's in Beis Lachem. And everybody goes to visit the Vachanemenu, our mother. So I was there, and you know, we're talking by her tomb, and I saw a few people sitting on a bench, and they're eating their lunch. So I said to somebody, you know, people go sit next to a grave and eat their lunch. There's a place to eat your lunch. So they told me the people come in here regularly because to visit Rachel, and they consider Rachel the Mama Rachel, they call her Mama Rachel, and they feel that it makes her happy to see people eating a lunch, so they eat their lunch there. I mean, Rabbi
Zeilingold, that story that you just told about the Rebbe and his mother was worth, this whole interview was worth that story. That is a precious story.
Can I go now?
No, you cannot go anywhere. That's a precious story.
Where are we up to?
That was a beautiful story. That was a really beautiful story.
And
I want to congratulate you for knowing to be in the right place at the right time. That's also
I don't know how I got there, but I remember seeing it because it was such a beautiful scene. And she's you know, like the way she said it, you can't fool your mother. You can fool other people, but you can't fool your mother. I know what's going on.
That's a beautiful story. So Tayir Mason.
What?
That's a beautiful story.
So the story is that Shmuel had been by the Rebbetzin, and we were walking on Kingston Avenue, I and Shmuel, and we're walking on Kingston Avenue from Eastern Parkway between Union and President Street. And coming towards us was the Rebbetzin with, what's his name? Shmuel's Mechutin. But Bell Eunuch. Bell Eunuch used to walk with the Rebbetzin. He had a lot of shachar with the Rebbetzin. And he was walking with her. And walking slowly. And she would stop. And she walked down his line. She would stop and talk to me and say hello to people. She was very, As a matter of fact, we have a picture somebody sent us a picture of my wife. The Rebbe Hannah used to go to the affairs of the Agudas of the Neshei Chabad. She used to go, and she used to be with them. So there's a group of people, I think a choir, and my wife, Ozana Songiona, is singing, and she's standing in front of the Rebbe Hannah singing to her. I mean, she would call these things. She would talk to the people there. She was very accessible, and came out there, and she knew Shmuel. She knew Shmuel. Shmuel was already married. He was married to Chav Gimel. I got married to Chav Dalet, and she stopped to talk. And she asked him, "How are you? How's your wife? This, well, they had a baby, whatever it is." Then she said to me, I said to her, we were engaged. I was engaged that time. And at that time, it was a special privilege, and David Raskin took care of this. David Raskin was one who took care of this. That a special privilege, I don't do it for every chassan, but so many chassanim with their kala was invited to visit with the Rebbe Sinachana before the chasana. And actually, this was we were married in Nisan, Tavshin Chav Dalet, and actually just a few months after that, the very beginning of Tishrei, Vav Tishrei, Chav Hey, that's when the Rebbe Sinachana left us on the Shabbos. So it was actually just a matter of a few months before. And again, we got married in Nisan, so 6-7 months before. And then she said to me, maybe I said to her, I'm coming tomorrow, you're coming up tomorrow. I'm coming up tomorrow. We talked about I'm going to see it. I'll see you tomorrow night, see you tomorrow evening. So then she turned to Shmuel and she said, I don't know if she said do or ear. I imagine she said do, I think so. I don't know. She says do, or maybe you'll come with your wife. So Shmuel looked at her, where do I come into the picture? And this is, I was getting married, and usually didn't invite other people except, the husband and Kala went. And she's inviting Shmuel and his wife. So she said, and Shmuel will argue the exact words that she said, but I stand behind this is what she said. She said, Min hat mir gesagt, I have been told, and she was smiling, wherever one of you goes, the second one of you goes there also. That you follow each other out. So I'm asking you to come up. And indeed, he did come up that next night.
Yeah, that's how I remember it.
Okay.
One of my favorite stories. It's a very nice thing. Rabbi Zeilingold, I want to take a turn, and I want to take a turn. I want to turn a little bit, and I want to talk to you and ask you about the shul. I know there's so much more to talk about. There's so much more to talk about before we get to Adath Israel, but we don't have all the time in the world, and I want to talk about the shul.
I thought we did have all the time in the world.
Yeah, but you said, well, okay. Anyways, I want to talk about the shul. Let's see how far long we can go.
Yes.
I want to talk about the shul. I want to ask you about, when I was a kid in your shul, there were characters in the shul that I have to, apologize. We were little kids. We made jokes about them. We imitated them. These were the senior old fogies, quote unquote, of the shul. And to us, they were just characters. But now you get a little bit older, you appreciate that these were not just characters. They were special individuals. So I want to ask you about a few names and give me what you can, some insight for me, for the people my age, for the people that similar, feeling. There were two brothers that my father talks about. I never met them. I think by the time I got there, they were already gone. There were two brothers with the last name Biber.
Biber.
What can you tell me about these two brothers?
I'll tell you about every person, that every person in his or her own way was special. And sometimes, in my shul, when I speak on Shabbos, I say this Shabbos is a special Shabbos. So somebody once came over to me and he says, every single Shabbos you get up and you say that this Shabbos is special. So how can every Shabbos be special? I say it is, because that's the way it is. Every Shabbos is special. Pashas Noach is not the same as Pashas Lech Lecha. It's a new Shabbos. And so I would say that perhaps everybody will speak about, was special in his or her own way. But I would have to say that the Bible brothers were special. They were very special. And you have to remember that they had come from Europe. And this is soon after Europe, with everything that it meant to us. And as I'm going to tell you about others that you will ask me about, their greatest asset or their most outstanding characteristic was perhaps their being totally, and we would use an English word, simple, but the English word simple certainly does not characterize them perfectly, far from it. Because instead of simple, what I really mean to say is that they were really very uncomplicated. They're very straight, they know what they had to do, and they did it. And these were Yidden who had gone through tremendous Mesiras Nefesh in Europe, tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. And they had not had the opportunity to delve into the sources in Torah. They were not learned people. And I say this to them with the greatest measure of respect and understanding. But they had a very strong and a very deep love for Torah mitzvahs and for all good in Yonim. And Mr. Biber and his brother, Mr. Biber, Yehuda Biber, was married, wife, children, Baruch Hashem, alive and well, children, and had a brother, Chaim Yitzchak, I believe his name is Chaim Yitzchak, I'm quite sure it was a brother who was never married and lived with them. But very special in their own way, because they were very determined to do everything, and had gone through tremendous, we don't have to relive that, we don't have to talk about that, but had gone through, unbelievable agony, etc., in Europe, and been saved from the clutches, and were here, and they made the shul. To them to go to shul was they would never miss going to shul, and they would be involved in everything in the shul, and they were good with everybody, and everybody was good with them, and everything was done perfectly, and they would give themselves completely to help them to do whatever they could. And it so happens that Mr. Biber, Yehuda Biber, he would daven on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, he would daven Shacharis, and he had a very good nusach. He used to lead the services, had a very, very nice nusach and a very good nusach. And for many years, he served as the gabbai of the shul to call up, and he did a very good job in that. And he, again, was very involved in everything that happened. But they were working people. They went to work every morning. I think in the weekdays, if I remember, he did not come to daven the minyan. Couldn't. They had to go very early to daven. They worked, I think, someplace in Minneapolis. They would go early, come back at night. But anytime they came back, if they could come into daven, they did. And again, to have a shul, this is what the shul was made of. I might give them another name, or another title, I should say. Instead of saying simple or uncomplicated, they were Tehillim Yidden. And that is to say that the Tehillim was the best part they could do, that they did that. And as I'm thinking that, I'm just thinking about your Zeidi Gordon, who had both sides, because he was very, very learned man, very, very learned man. And I'm just getting off the subject because I think of this now. Very learned, of course, and everything. But at the same time, he was a Tehillim person, your great-grandfather, Zeidi Gordon. And as a matter of fact, he was very, he instituted, do you know how he instituted to do Tehillim in our shul?
No.
You don't know?
No.
I'll tell you. As you know, I'll come back to the Bibles. Just for a few seconds. I'll come back to the Bibles. As you know, he was very to Tehillim, but when the Friedrich Rebbe made the takona, when he instituted to say they share Tehillim after the davening every day, you look in the Hayom Yom where it's written. It's written in one of the first days of Hayom Yom in Kislev, where they write the takonas of the Friedrich Rebbe. And Friedrich made a takana to say the Tehillim, which we say every day, which actually is not Lubavitch. I mean, there's another Tehillim also. This day, this is how it's divided up, to be divided up in 3 days. It's not Lubavitch to divide it up into 30 days. But other people used to say to them before the davening, and Lubavitch does it dafka after the davening, for whatever reason. But this is the Tehillim, and the Frierdiker Rebbe, where he writes in that teaching, which is put in his letter, which is in Hayom Yom, that he's making this takana not only for Batik and Asiris, which are Chabad, but for everyone, whatever, was Ashkenaz, whatever. And your great grandfather took that very seriously. So Baruch Hashem, your grandfather took it very seriously, and Baruch Hashem, we had this chus, the great chus. He came to our shul on many occasions. Baruch Hashem for simchas. Gave the simcha for each of the simcha which you made in our shul, the bismilas, etc. And then when it came to Yochanan's bar mitzvah, he was there, Yochanan's bar mitzvah, and he said to me, he came over to me, father came over to me, and he said to me, I want to institute, should say Tehillim after the davening. But however, what I'm asking you for is, I want to institute the davening, but I'm asking that everybody should say, don't have to say the whole Tehillim, don't for that day. But I'd like, they said, simply should say together at least the first capital Tehillim. And as he say one capital, then you'll see as the time goes along. And I'm donating a dozen, whatever it is, maybe more than a dozen Tehillims in honor of the birth and bismillah of my grandson. It was a birth. I'm sorry, the birth. Bismillah, I meant. The birth of my grandson, he came for the birth. My grandson, I'm sure it was a birth. My grandson, Yechanan, Langa Kutiyot. And we donated to the Siddur, to the show. And of course, as you can imagine, many years later, Yechanan came over to me and said, if I could take those Tehillim home, then I'll put other ones there. He did. But coming back to Bible, they were careful with their Tehillim. They said their Tehillim. They were Tehillim eating. And whatever they could do, they did do, to sit and learn Blat Gemara. I don't know if they had that capability, but they were very much in it. And they were really, in many ways, the body of the shul, because they gave the shul the aura that it had, and everything that we had in the shul, they were the fire of the shul, and they were there always, and it was to them. They loved the shul was their home. And he had Zechrein and Baruch there. Their memory should be a blessing for each one of us who knew them, and for those who didn't know them also, and also those who didn't know them, but had ashpah from them, from the very good things they did in this world, and for all the good things they did.
My father told me that at one point he wanted to make a minyan to say Shabbos Mevarchim Tehillim, Shabbos Mevarchim before davening. And he asked the Bibers if they would join the minyan once a month to say the whole Tehillim.
Yeah.
And they said they say the whole Tehillim every Shabbos. Why is Shabbos Mevarchim special? Yeah. They said they say the whole Tehillim every Shabbos to thank Hashem for saving them from the.
Yes, Hashem.
So when you talk about the Tehillim, saying Tehillim every day, that leads very naturally into the next character, because one of my memories from being a kid in Yeshul in St. Paul is that towards the end of davening, there was a man who used to open up all the Tehillims to the right page, and then he would go around the shul giving out the Tehillims to everybody, and the man was at least 50 years older than everybody else in the shul. And it was very interesting that he felt himself like the servant to open the pages and then to give it out to everybody and run around handing out Tehillims like a little child. And this, of course, was Berel Gans, who was a chazan. They called him Chazan Gans. I don't know if he was a chazan. So tell me about Berel Gans. I remember the songs that he sang, the Mishabeirach and Shabbos Mevorchim. Chayim, Chayim, Chaverim, Kol Yisroel, Chaverim. And, Chadesh, Chadesh Yomeinu. Berel Gans, a very, very strong presence in my memories and in the memories of all the kids from Shul. So tell us about this very interesting job. My father loved to talk with him for hours. We couldn't go home because my father was stuck talking to Beryl Gans or listening to Beryl Gans talk. And then later, Beryl Gans had a friend who came. Rabbi
Yeah,
Yisrael,
what?
a friend who came, who showed up and was a part of the shul. Rabbi Yisrael, I think his name was, also from the same hometown. But anyways,
Yeah.
let's talk about Beryl Gans.
They come from the town with the rocket shop from.
Right,
I
from
think.
Dvinsk. Dvinsk.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, as I was saying to you before, everyone is special in his own way. And yes, you're right. They used to take the Tilims, and he did this, with tremendous sincerity. He would take this Tilim, open it up, find the page, put another one. And as a matter of fact, in our show, not too many years later, another one, whose name is Beryl, and he was there at that time when Beryl Gans, all Hashem used to do it. And others actually beginning off to somebody else right now. But I'm thinking of Beryl Bendit, Selanga Guti Yoren. He took that upon himself. Then I think he went away. I think he went to yeshiva. They used to do that. So it was that itself, was a beautiful continuation of what Beryl Gans did, because the two of them, again, I have to say every time I say Beryl Bendit, I have to say Guti Yoren, they were so much alike, but so much different. And it could be only amongst Yidden where you could have two people from two generations, not two, three generations, no matter 3 generations, from 3 completely different backgrounds. And he came from Russia, Russia, with all the everything that Russia did and that happened, and it was. And Bill Bennett, Slangion, he was Baruch Hashem, brought up as an American kid and everything. And here, it was beautiful because they're both doing the same thing, opening up Tehillim, beginning to say Tehillim. And each one, and Beryl Gans was one who did that. And he, to come to shul was, a special treat for him. He came to shul. And again, he was one of those who loved the shul. And you're right, he used to when he used to daven, everybody used to listen. And it was good to everybody. It was kind of what he had something to say about everything. And I'll tell you something, sometimes you think of these people, they don't know anything, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and this and this and that. And I learned many things from him. The way he did his anhoga, how he acted, how he behaved. You have to watch him very, very carefully, because unfortunately his children, for most of these people, they had no way of expecting that their children should go in their path. They had no way to be able to connect with their children, their grandchildren, to follow them. Very, very, some had great hatzlach in that, were very fulfilling in that, and had success in that. But unfortunately, many didn't, weren't able to. But when I think of him on Erev Yom Kippur. And Erev Yom Kippur, we have the good custom that before Mincha, everybody gives tzedakah. We call it kapora. Some people do that. Most people come from Europe. They weren't able to have the chicken, the this and that. So they take it with money. They do kaporas with money, with guilt. And they'll go and put it in the plates. So people come on Erev Yom Kippur, and they have plates. And 7 they had tables which are full of plates. And they would come in and would take a whole stash of money and throw it all over the place. And Beryl Gans used to come in, and he took out of his pocket a bag full of coins. And he'd take out a bag full of coins. He'd take out a coin, and he had a pen, and he had paper. And he wrapped each one of the coins in a piece of paper and wrote something on it and put it into the plate. He wrote a word on it and a stack of coins, this, that, what, that on, and was mumbling so as he did it. And of course, when he went away, I picked it up, and he was writing the names on each coin of each of his children, grandchildren, was praying to the Rabbi Shalom for them, that Rabbi Shalom should have Rahmanas on them. And I mean, obviously, we cannot connect with the tremendous emotions that go together with that. On Erev Yom Kippur, a person think of his children, praying to the Rabbi Shalom. Rabbi Shalom, I know what he said. I don't know how to look after. I can't look after them. They know they whatever it is. You take care of them. You look after them, and writing their name, tzedakah for them, for his children, and doing it, really. When Torah said, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, he did that with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might. And I would think of him, actually, when I would speak, he would listen to me. Yeah, he did listen to me. And one time he came over to me, he says, Rebbe, I want to ask you a question. And when I answer the question, I don't want you to be insulted. I can't ask me a question. I shouldn't be insulted. He says, you always, he says to me, you always tell us a story about Lechatchila Areba. You know what Lechatchila Areba? I'll tell you the story is, the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbe says that the Rebbe Marash used to say this very often, that when a person comes, is walking along the street, whatever it is, there's a barrier, there's something in your way. And you've got to get from side A to side B, side 1 to side 2. You got to cross that barrier. And the barrier is a big barrier, it's a difficult barrier. So you might think to yourself that what you do is you crawl underneath it. You crawl in, there's a little space in the middle, you squeeze yourself a little bit and you crawl underneath it. You'll try, you can't get underneath it, you can't get through it. So you'll jump over it, you find out, you go flying over it. And the Rebbe Marash, and this one used to say that, and I say, don't wait till you're crawled underneath, don't do it crawled underneath, but do it, start off everything, which means, in simple English, it means that our attitude should always be higher and above anything that stands in your way. Stands in your way, just move over it. So I don't want to, Rebbe says that. But from what I remember in Russia, they used to say the other way around. They used to say, everybody says, if you have a barrier, you should jump over it. And I say you should crawl under it. That's what he told me. So I thought to myself, that's a good question. He says, yeah, that's what they used to say. That's what they used to say. If you can't get, you can't see a barrier, you get over, you jump over, you can't jump over, you get underneath it. So I thought to myself, and I thought probably, I asked with somebody, and I came to the conclusion that it's both possible. You can read it in both ways. The Rebbe Marash used to say, if you can't get underneath, jump over it. And perhaps others said that, you come to something, you might want to say, I'm going to jump over it. Get over it. Don't, if you haven't jumped over, maybe not be able to jump over it, but get under it. Even if you got to get down on your knees and crawl underneath it, make sure you do it, whatever it takes you to do it. That's a different way, a different perspective, and certainly not the point that is brought out by the Chatchila Rebbe or the Rebbe Marash, but it does say that use whatever means is possible to do the job you have to. Even if you got to get down and crawl underneath, you get to the other side, which I can imagine was perhaps correct. But it certainly taught me the lesson that if you say this way or that way, that nothing should ever be a barrier. Be above it, if you get over it too. That's obviously the way we look at it, and that is what we should do to climb over it. But whatever you are, never allow any kind of barricade or barrier or anything in the way to deter you or to in any way slow you down in terms of serving the Rebbeinu Shalom, or I would say, in other words, or from getting from point A to point B, where we have to go. And point B is the point we have to get to do the things that we have to do.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Was he a survivor?
Yes, I think. No, I'm not sure. I don't know. I think so. Yes, because they came into Russia, and to be very honest with you, they went through very difficult, whatever it was in Russia. whatever it was, he was in
It wasn't Disneyland.
It certainly was not Disneyland.
It was not Disneyland. So every morning after Shacharis, as soon as davening ended, Dave Katz would make an announcement. The bar is now officially open. And Nachman Lifshot would say, very good, Dave. And it was such a joke. We boys laughed at it. You know. What was the nature of these two guys, Dave Katz and Nachman Lifshot? They were the butt of so many of our jokes, but they must have been such special people.
They really, really were. Dave Katz is, each one of them is as I use the term, as a bracha, it's worthy of a bracha in itself. Sometimes you have two food items, and you figure you can get away by making one bracha on both of them. But if something is very special, then you make a bracha on each one of them separately. So put them together. Yeah, they were together in many, many ways. But let's take a little look at Dave Katz, first of all. Dave Katz there was one Dave Katz, there was no one else but Dave Katz. And he did exactly what he had to do, never went to yeshiva, never learned, brought up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and he had a car, he went to work every day. And I'll tell you, Dave Katz, he moved into Highland. To give you a picture of who he was, to give you a picture of what he did. He used to live actually a lot of further down, if you know Snelling Avenue, down towards Midway. He lived there, and on that road, on Office Snelling, there was a shul, which is called Beth Jacob. Beth Jacob. And that shul later merged with another shul and became a conservative shul in Egan, which is there now. They're now in Egan. But it was a conservative, it was not conservative. I make a mistake. It was not conservative. It was officially Orthodox. I make a mistake. It was an Orthodox shul. But the Orthodox shuls at that time in many cities, and in St. Paul also, the Orthodox shul, there were like ourselves, our own shul, which is from a shul. But there were other shuls where they had a microphone, and the men and women sat together. They did not have mechitza. And this shul was Orthodox and did not have mechitza and had a microphone, but it was Orthodox. And Dave Katz was a shul man, was a shul person. That's a shul. He went to shul. I think in the morning, he came in the morning also. Every morning, every evening, he drove. And I have to tell you, to drive with him was, he got into the car. I'll tell you a story about it in a few minutes, about his driving. And he started the car and he drove, whether to right, left, this, I don't think it was the world's most qualified driver, but he got everybody, he picked people up in the morning, got to pick up this one, got to pick up Nachman Lifshot, got to pick up this. He went and this and this. He did exactly what I do, came to the show, sat down and davened, took out his siddur, he davened. Whether I don't know to what extent, I do not know to what extent he knew how to read Hebrew, to a certain extent, yes. He was a Kadeshim, and he was in shul every single day, never missed going to shul. Same thing Nachman Lifshot. So I'm going to come in a few minutes. But anyways, when he was at the others, before he came to our show, he used to go to the Beth Jacob in Standing Avenue. He used to go every single day. And he would go morning, evening, night, this and this. One day, he went to the show, to the Beth Jacob show, and there was a committee meeting. And at that committee meeting, they took a vote, and there was a vote that the shul should become conservative. We'll get more people, we're going to have people, and today nobody's Orthodox, people don't need it, people don't want it. They're going to be actually very, very fine people. Used to go to the Nadiches, were involved in Beth Jacob, and pastors were very, very much involved. When they had a meeting, the meeting was decided, there was a vote was taken, the shul is now conservative. David Katz got up, He walked over to the place where he sat. He had his tallis bag on there. He wore a tallis bag, took the tallis bag, and he never stepped foot in that building again for the rest of his life. He never, ever stepped foot in that building. That was Dave Katz. That's what he did. And if there's anything that needed to be done in the shul, he would do it. And he loved to do it. And yes, you're right. He got into the cost of serving every morning. And how he got that bar, he would say, he knew that it elicited a laugh from everybody, but he enjoyed it. Bar is now open. And Nachman, those two should have gone touring together. Nachman would say, yes, Dave, whatever it is, everybody would laugh, and the bar was now open. And that is what he did. I'm thinking something else of Dave Katz, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I told you that how he left the Beth Jacob, and I remember
Driving.
the what?
The driving. The story with the driving?
No, one time. This is a story. One time. This is what I'm telling you now is a true story. Now, if you want to know the translation of the word cold, C-O-L-D, don't ask Google, and don't go to your freezer. Come to Minnesota in the winter. Cold. Cold could be 25 degrees below zero. So there was one Shabbos. Shabbos, usually, many people for Shabbos, they come with their cars. They come on Friday evening, leave the car outside. We don't have any indoor parking, certainly not. The car outside. They come right to Shabbos, they go outside and start the car. And Vahi was one Shabbos. There were 4 cars were lined up outside the shore, and it was, I don't know if it was 20 below zero, or 20 below zero, I don't know, remember what it was, but it was bitterly, bitterly, bitterly cold. So about 4 cars outside on the higher level, on the upstairs level of the shore. And so everybody's afraid to go out because they're sure the cars would not start. They had what to be afraid of. They had to be what to be concerned about. So there's discussion. The discussion was that one person is going to go out, going to get his car started. When he gets his car started, then we're going to add, we're going to go from one car to another car because you could, from one car, you could, attach the battery, the cord from one to another. So 4 cars, Mr. A went out, got into his car, and there's special rules how to get a car started when it's cold. What the rules are exactly, I don't know, but you've got to press your foot on the gas and you've got to lift it up very, very slowly and put the key in the ignition and turn it a little bit and turn it back, and then put your foot down, put your foot out. Rules. Followed all the rules, didn't come out. Finished. Came back, can't do it. He came back, okay, and everybody said, no, no, no. You couldn't see outside because the windows were completely covered with frost. And he said one word, gestorben. Gestorben means dead. Car's dead. Mr. Number 2 went out. Okay, good. He tried to put his foot down. He tried to put his own. Now he knew another one. You got to press it down 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Nothing happened. You got to turn the key this way, that way, this way. 1, 2, 3. Get back. Gestorben. Number 3 went out. Number 3 went out. You know another way. You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and you do it very, very, very slowly, and then very fast. Didn't work. Comes back, gestorben. Then Dave Katz goes out. Now Dave Katz never went to school, and he never learned that to get a car started in the winter, that you've got to do it very slowly and very gingerly, and you've got to do it with tremendous care how you do it. He did not know any of that. He got into his car, took his key, put it on, and he got his car. Not right away, guys. He didn't know any kunsten. He didn't know anything about anything. He knew you take the key, you put it in there, and you goes. And within a few minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, there was smoke coming out from the back, and the exhaust was coming out. And then they connected card number 1, his card, to card number 3, card number 2, card number 1. And soon there was a tremendous amount of smoke going up, from the back and from the exhaust, tremendous amounts going up. Then everybody said, "Go and the cars went merrily down the roadway, down the driveway. Car number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Now I've told this story over in Shul. I know there's a very, very cold day. I tell that story over, but I add something to that story. And what I have when I tell that story, that is a true story. He went there, and he got everything going. I said, each one of those first 3, when they came back, they said the same thing. One word, gestorben, dead. Battery is dead. And they're right. The battery was dead. And I say to the people, the battery was not really dead. Because if something is, when it's undead, you can't, we're not Chesa Mason people, only Banisha Chesa Mason. So evidently, it was not completely dead. There was a spark within that battery that was still alive. So after Dave Katz did his job, they went to the second one, number 3, number 2, number 1, that was able with a connection and connecting it to that. If you connect it to the first one, which is really going, they could revive that spark and could resurrect what was in there and bring back the life, because there was a drop of life in there, drop of life, but it was not gestorben. You can't say gestorben. There was life. The proof is that 10 minutes later they're driving down the parkway. And I would tell my parishioners, my congregants, and the same is true of Achinu and Yisrael, Tzalanga Guti Yorim. Sometimes you can evaluate another Jew, and you can say to yourself, I don't want to use the word. I don't want to use the word on another Jew, but there's nothing there. You can say, well, there's no life there. What's going to happen? And that's absolutely not true. There's in every single one of us, there's a spark. And the spark might be hidden, might be way, way within the neshama. You can't get it. But every single one of us has a spark, and that spark is called Etzem Shabanefesh. It's called the Pinta the Yid. And on Yom Kippur, we call it Yechida. That is Yechida Yachador, our connection with the Rebbeinu Shalom. That firm connection, that can never be severed. That can never in any way, never be weakened. But you've got to connect it. If it's connected to a source of life, a real life, a going life and growing life, you get it going, then you've got a beautiful, beautiful thing to go. And I think it's a good lesson. And Dave Katz is one who taught us that lesson. But Dave Katz, as long as he could, he walked to shul, came to shul, was involved in shul, and he's very, very sorely missed by us. He's been away a long time. Now we'll come to Nachman Lifschultz. And Nachman Lifschultz was, in his own way, was absolutely, he actually had a very good background. And he was brought up in a town in Wisconsin. I forget the name of the town.
Sheboygan.
It was not Sheboygan. It was brought up in another. It was not Sheboygan. It was brought up in another town. I forgot the name of the town. But in Wisconsin, there were many shul in the small towns, besides Sheboygan and Manitowoc, and these very small towns. I forgot what name it is. I don't think it was Sheboygan. But I remember I once went into, I was in Wisconsin, and I went into what I think was a post office. And for some reason or other, there was pipes there, and they looked very familiar, these pipes. And I asked about it, and they told me this had been the synagogue, and those pipes were obviously the pipes of the mikveh in that particular building. So he had a very, very good upbringing, and his parents were very observant.
Was it Oshkosh?
No, it was not Oshkosh. No, it was not Oshkosh. I don't remember the name of the city, whatever. But he had a very, very good upbringing, but he knew one thing: Shabbos, he doesn't work. 100%. He never, ever, I don't want to talk about his family and this, but everyone that he knew, unfortunately, people do not know about Shabbos that. There was no, but Shabbos would come back before Shabbos, and he lived by himself and never, he had been married, And unfortunately, his wife died under very, very sad circumstances. He got married at an early age. And unfortunately, his wife, Nebuch Kinishkadah, she choked to death. And he was not able to save her, to do anything. He was by himself. And he absolutely was not able to do anything himself. Absolutely. He could not make an egg by himself. He couldn't do anything himself. He could barely cook water. He came to shul, he knew how to daven. He knew how to daven very, very well. He would daven in the shul, but he would never, ever miss going to shul. So he'd walk in a half hour late and 45 minutes later on Shabbos, he had to walk, had to get up. But he was 100%. Nobody could move him 1 inch, 2 inches. He couldn't do that. And as he got older, life became more difficult for him. And he was always ready to learn, sit at learning. He would sit down, whether he understood it or not, I don't know. I don't think he ever had the opportunity to learn Torah. I don't think he went to yeshiva. But to him, Shabbos, I think, and I was told, what he used to do during the week, I think he was in a place, and there were shmatas there. There was, pair of piece of cloth. He used to separate shmatas. Shmatas is old clothes separated. And from what I was told, is that a person who gave him the job who was not of our shul, actually couldn't even do his work properly, but simply paid him for his time, where they realized he was not able to do it. He went to work. Everything he had, he would take only from what he'd worked for, what he was paid, and didn't look for anybody's help. And he was not able to look after himself. And Baruch Hashem, people did look after him. Shabbos would take him home, take him to the house. But he was a beautiful a place where we learned the stories of how people lived at that time. In Wisconsin, all these places, Wisconsin and Grand Forks and South Dakota, and North Dakota, were full of Jewish people. The Jewish people. See, when they left Europe, the first part of the last century, the last part of the 20th century, in the early years, they came to America. You've heard, when they came into the port of New York and Ellis Island, and then Ellis Island, they were separated, this and this. There was an organization. The organization would look after them, and in order a lot of them went to New York, and New York had a yeshiva. Many, it had Yaakov Yosef, I think, was the first yeshiva, and then Torah Vadas. This is going back probably maybe even before 1920, but they sent them all over the country. So in all these little what?
Hayas was the name of the.
Oh, right. The organization was called Hayas, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Hayas, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. And they would send them all over the United States, all these tiny little shtetla. And unfortunately, they didn't last from there. And that is why actually our shul is a remnant of the West Side, because the West Side, for which our shul is an outgrowth, was full. They probably had 6, 7, 8 shul, and these people were all from there, but unfortunately they lacked the ability to be able to pass it on to their children. And also coming to the United States was very, very difficult to them, extremely difficult, because when they were in Europe, these people were taught, they learned that America was called the Golden Medina. And they were taught that in America, if you want to be rich, all you got to do is bend down and pick it up because the gold is lying on the ground. And that was not to be. They came and they had to work very, very hard. And they were not able to communicate with their children and to tell their children to pass it on. That's why this was saved by the day school movement. And the day school movement in the United States of America was made was the first one to make day school movement was a Frierdiker Rebbe. Frierdiker Rebbe, when he came here in 1940, the first thing he did was he came off the boat. Then he called people, and then the next day he was staying in a hotel in New York, and he called over Chassidim. He says, "Go make a day school." They said, "What do you mean? How do you make a day school?" He said, "Make a day school." He says, "Go out, go here, go there, go here, go there, and go into the street, take some candy, give it to the kids, call them into your house, teach them how to say Aleph Beis, and that'll be the day school for today, for tomorrow." And then, of course, Baruch Hashem, Server took over. But this, I don't know why I'm getting on this subject. You didn't ask me to, but should I continue or whatever it is?
It's 423.
It's what?
It's 423.
423. Okay. So let me just finish up. Anyways, the point is that that's where our shul came in, because our shul was a result of the West Side, and that's why it was such an important thing that our shul did get built up, because we had if our shul would not have been built up, there's all those shuls, everything would have fallen. And never half a shul would have been Yiddishkeit in St. Paul. And that is why the Rebbe put in a tremendous amount of work, which I know about. And our shul should remain a shul. Personally, for my candidacy, that I should be there. The Rebbe wrote a letter to somebody, and he wrote it in English. I want Rabbi Asher Zeilingold to become a synagogue, to become a rabbi of the shul. The Rebbe, of course, had no choice. I mean, there was a board of directors. And the Rebbe wrote to the person, time is of the essence. It has to be done. Time is of the essence. And when I came here, when my wife and myself came to St. Paul, and we came on Erev Pesach in Tavshin Chavov, and we went back for Chayel. The Rebbe called us in. We went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, "I want to tell you, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that you became the rabbi, and very, very meaningful." And the Rebbe used very strong expressions to say how satisfied he was, how happy he was with our shul, and Bezos Hashem with his continuation.
Rabbi Zeilingold, I remember one very, very strong, I know you got to go, I'm going to wrap it up in a second, but one very strong impression is that when we were kids, we were watching you run the shul, and we were watching you walking a tightrope. It was very clear to us that you were trying very hard to be loyal to the Orthodox Ashkenazic nature of the shul.
It was Sephardic.
But it was okay. But Sephardim sing Anim Zmiris.
What?
I know the Sephardim sing Anim Zmiris at the end of davening.
No, it was Nusach Sephardim, not Sephardim.
Nusach Sephardim. But I'm saying the traditions were not. It wasn't the Lubavitcher shul. It wasn't the Hasidic shul. And you were running the shul, and you insisted that the traditions that people were used to, that were there before you, be held on to. And we Lubavitcher kids, we snickered at it. We thought it was funny, even though we led the Anim Zmiris, which was also a fond memory that I have of leading the Anim Zmiris. But some of the traditions were not Lubavitch, and it was clear that you were being very careful to be loyal to the way the people were used to. But at the very, very same time, although you were careful not to transform it into a quote unquote Lubavitcher shtibel, but the Rebbe came across very strongly. And I'll tell you that I used to listen to your speeches. I enjoyed listening to your speeches. Not as much as I enjoyed playing Battleships Across the Ocean on the front lawn, but a little bit later, I got a little older, I used to enjoy listening to your speeches. And you once gave a speech about how you met a guy on an airplane, and the guy was very upset because he saw an ad in the New York Times that the Lubavitcher Rebbe asks that all Jews should give Mishleach Manos and Matanos Levyonim. And he said, since when is this the Lubavitcher Rebbe's mitzvah to give Mishleach Manos? And you gave a whole speech about how the Rebbe looked for opportunities to bring people together, for Avos Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael, Jewish unity. And the Rebbe saw in Mishleach Manos and the mitzvahs of Purim an opportunity to get people together. And therefore, the Rebbe, and you were talking about Hakel, how the Rebbe saw that Hakel is an opportunity to get people together. And therefore, yes, it's the Lubavitcher Rebbe who looks for every opportunity to bring the Jews together. And therefore, there's no problem saying the Rebbe asked you to give Mishleach Manos, the Rebbe asked you to gather for Hakel, the Rebbe asks the Jewish people should be together. And that was only one example of many, many talks. I remember when the Rebbe passed away, Gimel Tammuz, he spoke about the Rebbe very strongly. There was a very, very strong feeling in the shul. So I have to congratulate you from the perspective of a child for being able to make both the natives happy. You didn't turn it into a Lubavitcher shtivel, but at the same time, the Lubavitcher kids got a very healthy Lubavitcher education in your shul. The Lubavitch spirit was definitely there, and the feeling of the Rebbe was there unmistakably. So for that, I just have to say a personal thank you.
The Rebbe sent me to St. Paul, Minnesota. The Rebbe sent me, and the Rebbe told me when we were engaged, my wife and I were engaged, and Kala and I, we wrote to the Rebbe. We told the Rebbe that we want to go to wherever the Rebbe tells us to go. And the Rebbe wrote us back and said that I will tell you exactly where I want you to go. I will name the place I want you to go to, but you got to do what I tell you to do. Obviously, yes. And he told me at that time to get hatzois, to get propositions from people. Said I will choose this I will choose the place. So that's a whole long story for it in itself. For that, you'll have to invite me back sometime. And so whatever it is, I ended up in St. Paul, Minnesota. Never wanted that very much. But I will tell you, when I think about this right now, I think about this, and I've told this to people. I met people who I knew when I came there. People who I knew when I came there. And I told them, I want to tell you something. You know, when the Rebbe told me to, people said, the Rebbe didn't send you. He can't send you. We had a board of directors. Okay, he didn't. The Rebbe said to me, this is where I want you to go. And there was another person who wanted to come. There was somebody who was trying out to become the rabbi. And whatever, they chose me over somebody else, which was fine. The Rebbe never, ever, ever suggested to me that I should in any way do anything to make the shul anything than it was. He never said make it a Lubavitcher, said change the name. As a matter of fact, when I came there, the letter we got from the Rebbe, we got a letter from when we had the installation. And the Rebbe wrote the name of your shul, which is Adat Israel. Never spoke about Israel as Kisarisa and Makina and Hashem, Batucha. That's why I would certainly never change the name of the shul under any circumstance whatsoever. Because I feel that the Rebbe not only gave the name, but ratified that name into the Adat Israel. And with that came the Rebbe's bracha. But the Rebbe never suggested in any way that we should do anything in the shul, never discussed with me whatsoever. And people were very, very surprised. Because people thought, why should the Rebbe take? It so happens that in all due humility, I happen to be a good student, and I was okay to do the job. I was offered many, many good positions, and the Rebbe could have sent me to many, many different places. And this place, to put it very crassly, a Lubavitch would have nothing from it. It'd be a shul. The shul is a shul. The Rebbe never asked for that, because the Rebbe's intention, as you know very, very well, certainly from your own experience, from other experiences, was to bring Klal Yisrael to a greater level, greater measure of Yiddishkeit, and to bring Mashiach Tzidkenu, the Me'edah B'Yameinu B'Korev Mamash.
You remember Nachman Lifshutz's Asad El Sudasa?
Tadele Sudasa, the Savadi
Rabbi, Tairi, very geschmack. And Dave Katz's Mizmor LeDavid.
Yeah.
And his Dave Katz's Nar Hayisi.
Dave Katz's Nar Hayisi.
The Gamza.
Anti. Veloy voizi tzadik nezva v'zavavake shlochem.
Geschmack. Esamo b'shalom. Taka Hashem Yivarech Esamo b'shalom. Rabbi Zeilingold, wir halten doch inmitten. We're in middle. We didn't get anywhere. It was 2.5 hours, and we didn't get anywhere. We didn't even make a dent. So we definitely have to ask you to come back again on another day.
I have to tell you the truth. Unfortunately, I can't work when I work with the secretary. So I asked my secretary to check this morning. I said, could you go into and find out how long Rabbi Feller spoke for, how long Rabbi Feller, and Rabbi Friedman. Okay, each one was 2 hours, and I don't know anything about Rabbi Lou or somebody else. I think Rabbi Feller. I think she did have. I think maybe she did have Rabbi Feller. I said, "Oh, 2 hours? How am I ever going to do 2 hours?" I said, "You know what?
Yeah.
I'll do it for half hour. I'll do an hour, and I'll show my friend."
Yeah. Yeah. No, Rabbi Lou is
Anyways.
coming back again because Rabbi Lou also, we didn't even get started. Rabbi Lou Mitzvah Hashem is going to come back again next week. But I'll talk to your daughter, and hopefully, if you're up to it, we're going to do this again because we have a lot more to.
You're going to have to remind me what I spoke about because I'm going to forget.
I'll remind you.
Okay.
In the meantime,
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you for the opportunity for me to talk. I appreciate it very much.
you. We'll talk again.
Amen. Sei gesund.
Sei gesund.